This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've been debating whether to post this for a while now. It happened when I was 11, and I'm 23 now, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I've told this story to a few close friends over the years, and they all tell me I should share it more widely. So here goes. My family lived in Bellingham, Washington, but my grandparents had this big old Victorian house in Portland, Oregon. It was built sometime in the late 1800s, with all the creaky floors and weird little spaces you'd expect. We'd visit a couple times a year for holidays and stuff, and while I never saw anything straight up paranormal there before this happened, I always felt uncomfortable being alone in that house. This particular visit was in October, right when football season was getting good. I remember because I was super excited to watch the Seahawks game that Sunday. We'd arrived on Saturday, and everything was totally normal, playing board games with my little sister, my grandma making her famous apple pie, Dad and Grandpa arguing about politics while Mom tried to change the subject. You know, regular family stuff. Sunday morning, I woke up early because I was sleeping in this tiny bedroom on the 3rd floor, and the sun came right through those old, thin curtains. The 3rd floor was this converted attic space with slanted ceilings and these tiny windows that looked out over the neighborhood. My room had these old flowery wallpaper that was peeling at the seams, and a twin bed that squeaked if you even breathed too hard. After breakfast, I went back up to my room to watch pre-game coverage. The Seahawks were playing the Broncos, and I was pumped. I had my Russell Wilson jersey on and everything. The TV in my room was ancient, one of those boxy ones with the built-in VCR, but it worked. I also had this old rotating fan going because the 3rd floor got super hot, even in October. Around 11:30 in the morning, my dad poked his head in and said, "Hey bud, we're going for a walk around the neighborhood. Grandpa wants to show Mom and your sister the new community garden. You want to come?" I gestured at the TV. "No thanks. Game's about to start. Suit yourself. We'll be back in about an hour." I heard them all shuffling downstairs, the front door opening and closing, and then the house went quiet except for the game commentary and my fan whirring away. I was sprawled on my bed, completely focused on the kickoff, when maybe 10 minutes later, I heard what sounded like my mom calling from downstairs. "Ethan, can you come down here?" I was annoyed because the Seahawks had just gotten possession, and I didn't want to miss anything. I called back, "What? I'm watching the game." There was no response, so I figured she couldn't hear me over my fan. I groaned, turned off the fan, and opened my door to the hallway. "Mom, what do you want?" I yelled down the stairs. Her voice came back, but it sounded weird, kind of muffled or far away, like she was talking through a pillow or something. "Want to show you this?" I was confused because I thought everyone had left for their walk. Maybe Mom had stayed behind, or maybe they'd come back early. I started heading down the narrow stairs that connected the 3rd floor to the 2nd. "Mom, where are you?" I called when I reached the 2nd floor landing. "Here," came the reply, definitely from the 1st floor now. Something felt off about her voice, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. It was my mom's voice, but something about the tone wasn't right. It wasn't just muffled. It was like someone doing an impression of her that wasn't quite perfect. I went down the main staircase to the 1st floor. The living room was empty. So was the dining room and kitchen. "Mom?" I called again, starting to get a little freaked out. "Here," the voice said again, and this time I could tell it was coming from near the basement door. My grandparents' basement was unfinished and creepy as hell. Just concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a bunch of old junk stored down there. The light was this single bare bulb that you had to pull a string to turn on, and it barely lit anything. I hated going down there, even with other people. I walked cautiously toward the hallway where the basement door was. "Mom, are you down in the basement? I thought you went for a walk with everyone." No answer this time. I was standing about 10 feet from the basement door when suddenly it swung open by itself. Not violently or anything, just opened, like someone had pushed it from the other side. My heart started pounding. I could hear footsteps going down the basement stairs, that distinctive hollow wooden sound, and then that voice again. "Here." That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. My family was out on a walk. There shouldn't be anyone in the house, and whatever was making those sounds wasn't my mother. I backed away slowly at first, then turned and ran toward the main staircase. I needed to get out of the house, but all my stuff was upstairs, including my shoes and jacket. It was October in Portland, cold and rainy, so I couldn't just run outside barefoot in my jersey and shorts. I took the stairs 2 at a time, reaching the second-floor landing. Just as I was about to head up the narrow staircase to the 3rd floor, I froze. Standing at the top of those narrow stairs was something. It wasn't fully visible, more like a dark shape, a shadow that was denser than it should be. It was roughly person-shaped, but taller than my mom, with limbs that seemed too long, and it was using my mother's voice. "Here," it said, but now the voice was different. It still had my mom's pitch and tone, but the way it said the word was all wrong, like someone who had heard human speech but didn't quite understand how it worked. I screamed. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I screamed like I've never screamed before or since. I turned and flew down the main stairs, nearly falling in my panic. I didn't even think about shoes or jackets anymore. I just needed to get out. I slammed the front door behind me and ran halfway down the block before I stopped, gasping for breath on someone's lawn. It was drizzling, and I was getting soaked in my thin Seahawks jersey, but there was no way in hell I was going back inside. I sat on the curb, shivering, for what felt like forever, until I finally saw my family walking back toward the house. My mom spotted me first. "Ethan, what are you doing outside without a coat? You're soaking wet." I ran to them and probably looked completely insane, wet, barefoot, pale as a ghost. "There's something in the house," I gasped. "It was pretending to be you, Mom. It was calling me to the basement." My dad looked concerned, but I could tell he thought I was overreacting to something. "What do you mean, sport? Did you fall asleep watching the game and have a nightmare?" "No," I shouted, probably too loudly. "I was watching the game, and I heard Mom calling me downstairs, but you were all gone. And then the basement door opened by itself, and when I tried to go back upstairs, there was this thing at the top of the stairs." My mom put her arm around me. "Honey, we've been gone the whole time. There's no one else in the house." I know that's what makes it so scary. It wasn't a person. I was crying by this point, which was embarrassing because my little sister was watching me with wide eyes. My grandpa said, "Old houses make all kinds of noises, kiddo. Pipes, settling foundations, and the wind can make doors open if they're not latched properly." But I could tell by the way my mom was looking at me that she believed something had scared me badly, even if she didn't believe what I'd seen. I was always a pretty level-headed kid, not the type to make up stories or get spooked easily. Dad said, "Let's all go inside and get you dried off, okay?" I didn't want to go back in that house. I really, really didn't. But It was broad daylight, and my whole family was with me, so I let them lead me back. Everything looked normal inside, no sign of anything unusual. My dad checked the basement to make me feel better, he said, but of course found nothing. My mom got me a towel and some dry clothes, and Grandma made hot chocolate, but I couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness. I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little creak the house made. When bedtime came, I flat out refused to sleep in my third-floor room. "I'll sleep on the couch," I insisted. My parents exchanged looks, and finally my mom said, "You can sleep on the trundle bed in our room tonight." I didn't sleep much that night, despite being in my parents' room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow figure at the top of the stairs and heard that wrong version of my mom's voice saying, "Here." We stayed 2 more days at my grandparents', and I didn't have any more experiences like that. But I never went anywhere in that house alone again. Not the bathroom, not the kitchen for a snack, nowhere. My family probably thought I was being ridiculous, but I didn't care. That was 12 years ago, and to this day, I still refuse to sleep alone in that house when we visit. My parents and grandparents think I just had an overactive imagination as a kid, combined with being alone in a big old house. Maybe watching too many scary movies, though I actually wasn't allowed to watch horror films at that age. But I know what I saw and heard. That thing was trying to lure me into the basement, and when that didn't work, it was waiting for me upstairs. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gone either direction, and I never want to find out. My grandparents still live in that house. My grandma says she's never experienced anything strange there, but my grandpa did tell me once, after a few beers when I was in college, that he sometimes hears voices that sound like family members calling him when he knows he's alone. He laughed it off, saying old houses and older ears play tricks on you. I don't think it was a trick, and sometimes I wonder, if I had gone down to that basement, would I have disappeared? Would my family have come home to an empty house, wondering where I'd gone? I still don't know what was in my grandparents' house that day, and I hope I never find out. Story 2. I've been putting off talking about this for almost 2 years now. Even typing this makes my hands shake, but I need to get it out. Maybe someone will have an explanation that makes sense, because I sure as hell don't. I was working the graveyard shift at Moonlight Gas Station, a little place off Highway 16 about 20 miles outside of Greenfield. It's one of those spots where you can drive for an hour without seeing another soul. The pay was decent enough for a college dropout with no real prospects, and the owner didn't care if I studied or watched videos during the dead hours, which was pretty much every hour after midnight. That night, it was a Wednesday in late October, had been particularly dead. Not even the usual long-haul truckers stopping for coffee. Just me, the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of the refrigerators. By 2:30 in the morning, I'd already reorganized the candy aisle twice and wiped down every surface in the place. The isolation never bothered me before. I actually liked the quiet. But that night, something felt different. The air inside felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I needed some fresh air, so I stepped outside for a quick breather, leaving the door propped open since I was the only one there and would only be gone for a minute. The night was cold, way colder than I expected. I remember the way my breath clouded in front of my face, illuminated by the harsh neon signs advertising beer and cigarettes. The parking lot was completely empty, just 4 pumps under a metal awning, bathed in that artificial light that makes everything look sickly. Beyond the concrete, there was nothing but darkness and pine trees. No streetlights out here, just the stars and a sliver of moon. I walked around the side of the building, stretched, and checked my phone. 2:37 a.m., 4.5 hours to go before my replacement showed up. I took one last deep breath of the pine-scented air and headed back in, letting the door swing shut behind me. That's when I noticed him. At first, it was just a dark shape, something that shouldn't have been there. A man in a black hoodie was sitting on the ground behind pump number 3, just sitting there cross-legged. I froze. I hadn't heard a car pull up, and there wasn't one parked at the pump. He was just there, perfectly still, facing the store. My first thought was that he was drunk or high. We get that sometimes. People wandering in from the woods, usually locals who've had too much and decided to walk rather than drive. But something about the way he was sitting there made my skin crawl. It wasn't natural. Nobody just sits in a gas station parking lot at 2:30 in the morning without a car. I hurried back behind the counter and checked the security monitors. There he was, on camera 4, still sitting, now slowly rocking back and forth. The hood of his sweatshirt was pulled low, so I couldn't see his face. My hand hovered over the phone. Should I call someone? But what would I say? There's a guy sitting outside my gas station. They'd laugh at me. Before I could decide, he stood up. His movements were smooth, deliberate. He brushed off his jeans and started walking toward the entrance. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I quickly grabbed the baseball bat we keep under the counter, owner's policy, and held it out of sight below the register. The bell above the door jingled, and he walked in. Up close, I could see he was average height, maybe in his 30s, with pale skin and dark stubble. His eyes were, I don't know how to describe them, empty, like he was looking through me rather than at me. "Evening," he said, his voice surprisingly normal. "Or morning, I guess." I managed a weak, "Hey." My knuckles were white around the bat. "My car broke down about a half-mile up the road," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the highway. "Battery's dead. Got jumper cables?" I hesitated. His story made sense, but I had just been outside. I hadn't heard a car, hadn't seen headlights. And why would he be sitting behind a pump if he'd walked from the highway? Yeah, I think so," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "In the back office. Let me check." He nodded, then wandered over to the snack aisle, picking up a bag of chips, examining it like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Something was very wrong. My instincts were screaming at me. I bent down like I was looking for something under the counter, but instead, I glanced at the security monitor that showed the parking lot. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a car now, a dark sedan parked just at the edge of the lot, where the pavement meets the tree line. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. I'm absolutely certain of that. And worse, there was movement around it. A shadow, another person, crouching by the trunk. They were setting me up. They had to be. I've seen enough true crime to know what happens to gas station attendants who get lured outside at 3 in the morning. My hands started trembling so badly, I almost dropped the bat. I needed to think fast. "Actually," I called out, trying to sound casual, "I need to grab my phone first. Left it in the back. 1 sec." He looked up from the chips, that empty stare fixing on me. "No rush," he said, but there was a new tension in his voice. Instead of going to the office, I ducked down behind the counter and hit the silent alarm button. The owner had installed it after a robbery last year. It alerts the police, without setting off any visible or audible alarms in the store. When I stood back up, the man was at the counter, watching me, not pretending to shop anymore, just staring. "Couldn't find your phone?" he asked quietly. My stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow, he knew. It must be in my car, I stammered. I can go get... No need, he cut me off. His entire demeanor had changed. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. You know what? I think my friends can help with my car. Don't need those jumper cables after all. And then, this is the part that still gives me nightmares. He smiled. Not a normal smile. His lips stretched too wide, revealing too many teeth. And he laughed. A soft, amused laugh, like I was a child who'd done something adorably naive. Smart move with the alarm, he whispered, leaning in slightly. Most people aren't so cautious. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My fingers were numb around the bat I was still hiding. He backed away from the counter, still facing me, still with that terrible smile. You have a good night now. Sorry to disturb your shift. Then he walked out. Didn't run, didn't hurry. Just walked, like he had all the time in the world. The moment the door closed behind him, I lunged for the security monitors. On screen, I watched him stroll across the parking lot toward the car. The second figure, taller, also in dark clothing, emerged from the shadows and met him halfway. They spoke briefly, then both turned and looked directly at the store, at the camera, at me. They knew I was watching. They waved. Then they turned and walked into the forest behind the station, disappearing into the darkness. The car remained. I was shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor. I didn't dare go outside, didn't dare move from behind the counter. What if they were still out there, watching? What if they circled back? 7 minutes later, the longest 7 minutes of my life, 2 police cruisers pulled into the lot, lights flashing but sirens off. I watched on the monitors as 4 officers approached the store, weapons drawn. One stayed with the car while the others came inside. I broke down the moment they entered. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes and a tight ponytail, sat with me while I tried to explain what had happened through my tears. The others checked the store, the back room, then went to investigate the car. They returned with news that made me physically sick. The car's front passenger door was wide open. There had been a third person inside the whole time, waiting. The officers found duct tape, zip ties, and a hunting knife in the trunk. The vehicle had been reported stolen from a town about 100 miles away a week earlier. They searched the surrounding woods for hours, but found nothing. The men had vanished. The police said they must have had another vehicle waiting on a logging road that runs parallel to the highway. It was planned, coordinated. They knew the area, knew the shift changes, knew I was alone. They'd watched me step outside earlier. They'd been waiting for me to leave the safety of the store, maybe to help with the broken-down car. I've replayed that night in my head thousands of times. What if I hadn't noticed something was off? What if I hadn't checked the monitors? What if I'd gone outside with those jumper cables? I quit the next day. Couldn't even go back to collect my last paycheck. The owner had to mail it. I've been seeing a therapist, but it hasn't helped much. I still can't drive on dark roads, can't be alone at night, can't look out windows after sunset without imagining that man's face staring back at me. The police never caught them. Said without better descriptions or fingerprints, there wasn't much to go on. The case is still open, but I know it's gone cold. Sometimes I wonder if they've moved on to other gas stations, other lonely night shift workers, other people who might not notice what I noticed, who might step outside without hesitation. That laugh still echoes in my head. The way he didn't panic when he realized I'd triggered the alarm. The way he seemed almost pleased, like it was all a game. I don't know what they wanted from me that night, but I know I was supposed to be gone by morning, and no one would have found me for a very long time. Story 3. I still don't know how to explain what happened to us in that house. It's been 3 months since Vikram and I finally got out, but I wake up most nights in a cold sweat, thinking I can feel her watching me. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or supernatural stuff. I was always the rational one, the guy who'd laugh at horror movies and point out all the plot holes. But after what we experienced, I don't laugh anymore. It all started last year when Vikram and I moved to Bangalore for work. We're both software engineers, and we've been best friends since college. When we got job offers at the same company, it made sense to rent a place together. The house we found was perfect on paper, a 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood, affordable rent, and only a 20-minute drive from our office. The landlord, Mr. Sharma, seemed friendly enough, though looking back, there were signs I should have picked up on. He was weirdly insistent about us signing a full-year lease, and when we asked about the previous tenants, he got really vague, just saying they had to leave suddenly for family reasons. The first few weeks were normal. We were settling in, figuring out our routines, taking turns cooking dinner, the usual roommate stuff. But then things started to change. It happened so gradually that at first we didn't even notice. Vikram and I have been friends for 7 years, and in all that time, we maybe had 2 or 3 arguments, but suddenly we were snapping at each other over the stupidest things. I'd get unreasonably angry if he left dishes in the sink, and he'd blow up if I forgot to buy milk. It wasn't like us at all. We'd argue, then both feel weird about it afterward, like we couldn't understand why we'd gotten so upset. One night, about a month after we moved in, I came home late from work to find Vikram sitting in the dark living room, just staring at the wall. When I turned on the light, he looked at me like he was coming out of a trance. "You okay?" I asked him. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I thought I heard something." I didn't push it. We were both stressed with the new jobs, I figured. But that was the start of it all. The night everything began to spiral. A few days later, Vikram finally told me what had happened. He'd been alone in the house at around 2 in the morning, working on some code, when he heard his mother calling his name from outside. Not just any call, the specific way she used to call him when he was a kid, with that same inflection. The thing is, his parents live in Mumbai, over 900 kilometers away. He said he went to check, thinking maybe he was just tired and hearing things. But the voice called again, clearer this time. Definitely his mother's voice, coming from right outside our front door. When he opened it, there was nobody there, just the empty street and the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, lack of sleep. Maybe he was dozing off without realizing it. But I could tell by his face that he was genuinely shaken. Vikram isn't the type to make stuff up or get spooked easily. I wish I'd taken him more seriously then. Maybe we could have gotten out before things got worse. About a week after Vikram's experience, I was alone in the house cooking dinner. Vikram had texted saying he was running late, so I was just making a simple dal and rice. I remember standing at the stove, stirring the dal, when the air around me suddenly got cold, like unnaturally cold in the middle of Bangalore's heat. Then I felt it, someone standing directly behind me. I could feel their presence like a physical weight, the way you just know when someone is standing too close. I even felt breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, expecting to see Vikram trying to scare me, but there was nobody there, just an empty kitchen. But the feeling didn't go away. I could still sense someone there, watching me. It felt like a woman, tall, taller than me even. I don't know how I knew it was female, I just did. I backed away from the stove and grabbed my phone. my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial Vikram's number. By the time he answered, the presence was gone, but I stayed outside on our front steps until he got home. That night, we finally talked about it. Not just the weird feelings and presences, but the way we'd been acting too. The constant fights, the irritability, the feeling of heaviness that seemed to hang over the house. It wasn't just in our heads. Something was wrong with that place. The next few days brought more incidents. We'd hear knocking on our bedroom doors in the middle of the night, but when we opened them, the hallway would be empty. Sometimes the knocks would come in patterns, 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more, always the same sequence. We started keeping all the lights on at night, which helped a little, but ran up our electricity bill like crazy. Then came the footsteps. We'd hear them on the terrace above our bedroom, slow, deliberate steps pacing back and forth. The first time it happened, we thought it might be monkeys or maybe someone had broken in. Vikram and I went up to check together, armed with kitchen knives and our phone flashlights. There was never anyone there, but the footsteps would start again as soon as we went back downstairs. I remember one afternoon particularly clearly. It was a Saturday, and Vikram had gone to meet some colleagues for lunch. I was exhausted from a week of bad sleep and decided to try to take a nap. I remember lying down and closing my eyes, then jerking awake with that feeling you get when you think you're falling. Except when I opened my eyes, there she was, a woman hovering directly above me, her face just inches from mine. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe. She didn't look like a ghost from a movie, no white flowing clothes or transparent features. She looked solid, real, long dark hair hanging down around her face, eyes so dark they seemed like empty holes, and her mouth slightly open as if she was about to say something. I blinked, and she was gone. But I could still feel her in the room, standing by the door, watching me. I've never moved so fast in my life. I ran out of that house without even grabbing my phone or wallet, and I sat at the bus stop down the street until Vikram called, wondering where I was. When I told him what happened, he didn't laugh or try to explain it away. He just said, "I've seen her too." That night, we decided we had to move out. Whatever was happening in that house was getting worse, and neither of us felt safe anymore. The next morning, we started looking for new apartments online. We found a few options and made appointments to view them, but every single one fell through at the last minute. One place was suddenly rented to someone else just before we arrived. Another had a water damage issue that the agent just discovered that morning. A third was mysteriously taken off the market entirely. It felt like something was actively preventing us from leaving. We even tried staying with colleagues for a few nights, but both of us got violently ill as soon as we left the house, throwing up, fever, the works. As soon as we returned to the house, we'd feel better again. It was like it had some kind of hold on us. Finally, after weeks of this, we decided to just break the lease. We'd lose our security deposit, but it was worth it to get out of there. We packed up our stuff and went to talk to Mr. Sharma. At first, he seemed understanding. He said he'd come by that evening with the paperwork to terminate the lease early, but when he showed up later, something had changed. His whole demeanor was different, cold, almost angry. He refused to let us out of the contract, saying we'd signed for a year and would be legally liable for the full amount if we left early. When Vikram tried to explain that the place was unsafe, Mr. Sharma got this weird look on his face. Not surprise, but something else. Like he knew exactly what we were talking about. "You'll get used to it," he said in this flat voice that still gives me chills when I think about it. Everyone does eventually. That night was the worst. We were both in the living room, afraid to separate, when all the lights went out, not just in our house but the whole street. In the sudden darkness, we could hear those footsteps again, not just on the terrace now, but inside the house, walking slowly from the front door, down the hallway, toward the living room where we sat frozen. The temperature dropped so fast we could see our breath. My phone was dead despite being fully charged minutes earlier, and Vikram's was missing. We later found it in the refrigerator, though neither of us had put it there. We sat in the dark, backs pressed against the wall, listening to those steps getting closer and closer. Then came the smell, like wet earth and something rotting, and a whisper right between us, though we were sitting shoulder to shoulder with no space between. "You're home now. You'll never leave." I don't remember much after that. I know we ran, breaking through the door in our panic. We spent the night in our car parked at a gas station, shaking and unable to speak about what had happened. In the morning, we went straight to our office, unwilling to go back to the house even for our belongings. It took intervention from our company's legal team to finally get us out of that lease. They found some loophole about uninhabitable conditions, though we never told them the real reason we needed to leave. We sent movers to get our stuff while we stayed in a hotel. Half our belongings mysteriously disappeared during the move, including a framed photo of Vikram's family that he'd had since childhood. We're in a new apartment now, on the other side of the city. Things are normal here, no fighting, no presences, no whispers. But sometimes I still wake up with that feeling of being watched. And Vikram says he still hears those 3 knocks, followed by 2 more, though I never hear them when I'm with him. I looked up the history of that house recently. Turns out there was a woman who lived there in the 80s, who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Her husband claimed she ran off with another man, but her body was never found. The article mentioned she was unusually tall for an Indian woman of that time, nearly 6 feet. I don't know what was in that house with us. I don't know why it chose us or what it wanted. All I know is that I'll never go back to that neighborhood again, not even to drive through it. And sometimes, when I'm alone and it's very quiet, I swear I can still hear those footsteps, moving steadily closer. Story 4. I've always been a curious person, wanting to explore and discover new things. That curiosity nearly got me killed last month, and I still can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something truly horrific. I'm a senior at Midwestern State, living in an apartment with my 2 best friends, Jason and Andrew. We've known each other since freshman year, and despite our crazy schedules with classes and part-time jobs, we always try to hang out whenever we can. It was a Friday in late October when everything happened. For once, all 3 of us had the entire weekend off. No work, no immediate assignments due. We were sitting around our living room that morning, drinking coffee, and trying to figure out what to do with our rare free time. "We could drive to the lake," I suggested, but Jason shook his head. "Too cold now," he said. "It'll be dead empty and probably freezing." Andrew, who'd been scrolling through his phone, suddenly perked up. "Hey, my buddy Mike was telling me about this abandoned factory on the edge of town. Apparently it's been empty for like 20 years. Could be cool to check out." I hesitated. "Urban exploring? None of us have done that before." "Exactly," Andrew said, getting excited. "It's something different. And Mike said there's tons of old machinery and stuff still inside. Perfect for taking some photos." Jason seemed into it, and honestly, I was curious too. None of us were the rebellious type. We were the kind of guys who worried about our GPAs and job prospects after graduation. Maybe that's why the idea of trespassing felt like such a thrill. "Do we even know how to get there?" I asked. "Mike sent me the location," Andrew replied. It's not far, maybe 15 minutes out of town. We spent another hour debating it before finally deciding to go. Jason drove us in his old Honda Civic, while Andrew navigated using Google Maps satellite view. We'd decided to park somewhere nearby and walk the rest of the way to avoid drawing attention. The closer we got to the outskirts of town, the more uneasy I felt. The neighborhood changed drastically, from our college town's familiar streets to industrial zones, and finally to what looked like a completely abandoned area. Buildings with boarded windows lined pothole-filled streets. The few businesses still operating had heavy security bars over their windows. "Pull in here," Andrew said, pointing to a gas station about a block away from where the factory supposedly was. We parked and started walking. What immediately struck me was how quiet everything was. It was around 2 in the afternoon, but there wasn't a single car driving by. No pedestrians, not even distant traffic, noise. It felt like the whole block had been abandoned. "This is weird," I said, keeping my voice low even though there was nobody around to hear us. "Where is everyone?" "Factory's been closed for years," Jason replied. "Probably killed the whole neighborhood." When we finally saw the building, I almost gasped. In my mind, I'd pictured something smaller, maybe a warehouse or a small production facility. This was enormous. It must have covered at least 3 or 4 acres, with multiple stories in some sections. Red brick and concrete, with rows of broken windows stretching across its facade. The entire building was covered in graffiti, some artistic, but mostly just tags and obscenities. A rusted metal fence topped with barbed wire surrounded the property, but we quickly found what we were looking for. A section where previous trespassers had cut through, creating an opening just big enough to squeeze through. "Are we sure about this?" I asked, suddenly feeling like we were in way over our heads. "We came all this way," Andrew said. "Let's at least check it out for a bit." We slipped through the fence opening and approached the building. There was a loading dock with a door hanging partially open. We climbed up and entered. The smell hit me first, a mixture of rust, mildew, and something chemical I couldn't identify. The main room was enormous, filled with what must have been manufacturing equipment, huge metal machines, now rusted and covered in debris. Sunlight streamed through broken windows and holes in the ceiling, creating beams of light in the dusty air. "This is insane," Jason whispered, pulling out his phone to take photos. We moved slowly through the space, navigating narrow pathways between machinery. Glass crunched under our feet, and occasionally water dripped from pipes overhead. I was struck by how massive the interior was. We could barely see the other end of the room through the maze of abandoned equipment. "Let's split up a bit," Andrew suggested. "Not far, just to cover more ground." I headed toward what looked like the back of the main room, where I could see a hallway. I thought Jason was following me as I heard footsteps behind me. But when I reached the hallway and looked back, neither of my friends was there. They had wandered off to the left side of the factory floor. "I'm going to check down here," I called out. "I'll just be a minute." I heard a distant "okay" from somewhere in the cavernous room and proceeded down the hallway. It was darker here, with fewer windows. I used my phone flashlight to navigate. At the end of the hall was a heavy metal door, slightly ajar. I pushed it open, wincing at the loud creak it made. This new room was smaller but still impressive, maybe the size of a basketball court. More machinery filled the space, but different from what was in the main room. This looked like some kind of conveyor belt system. As I stepped further in, the door began swinging shut behind me. I quickly turned and caught it, propping it open with a piece of broken concrete. That's when I heard footsteps coming from the far end of the hallway I'd just left. "Jason, Andrew," I called out, thinking one of them had decided to follow me after all. No response, but the footsteps continued. I figured they couldn't hear me over the sound of their own movement, so I turned back to explore the conveyor room. I was examining some kind of control panel when I heard the metal door open and then close again. The piece of concrete I'd used to prop it must have slipped. "Hey guys," I said, turning around. "This room is pretty cool." But nobody was there. The room was empty besides me. A chill ran down my spine. I distinctly heard the door open and close, and I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone had followed me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the large room. "Is anyone there?" Silence. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the door had moved on its own from a draft, or maybe my friends had peeked in and left without saying anything. Still, something felt wrong. I decided to head back to the main room. As I approached the door, I heard a noise behind me, a soft scuffing sound, like a shoe on concrete. I spun around and my heart nearly stopped. About 6 or 7 meters away stood a man I'd never seen before. He was tall and gaunt, with long matted hair and an unkempt beard. His clothes were filthy and torn, but it was his eyes that terrified me, wide and wild, with a look that wasn't quite human. They reflected my phone's flashlight with an unnatural gleam. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then his face contorted into what I can only describe as a hungry grin, revealing blackened teeth. He lunged toward me. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because later Jason and Andrew said they heard me. I threw myself at the metal door, yanking it open and slamming it shut behind me just as the man reached it. I felt the door shudder as he crashed into the other side. I ran blindly down the hallway back toward the main room, my only thought being to reach my friends and get out. I could hear pounding on the metal door behind me, and then the creak of it opening. "Jason, Andrew, we need to leave now," I screamed as I burst into the main room. They were about 50 meters away, looking confused until they saw my face. "Run! There's someone in here!" I yelled, sprinting toward them. We all ran for the loading dock entrance, not looking back. I heard footsteps behind us, but they seemed to fade as we reached the exit. We didn't stop running until we'd squeezed back through the fence and reached Jason's car. "What the hell happened?" Jason demanded as we peeled out of the gas station parking lot. I told them everything between gasping breaths. The man, his appearance, how he'd waited for me to separate from the group before revealing himself. "He was living in there," Andrew said, his face pale. "He must have been watching us from the moment we entered." "Did you see anyone else when we first went in?" I asked them. "Any signs someone was living there?" They both shook their heads. "But that place was huge," Jason said. "He could have been anywhere, watching us." We drove straight back to our apartment and locked the doors. I was shaking for hours afterward. We debated calling the police, but what would we say? We were trespassing, and all I could report was a homeless man who had scared me. We decided against it. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, those eyes that didn't look right, that hungry grin. I kept thinking about how he'd followed me specifically, waiting until I was alone. The next day, curiosity got the better of us, and we searched online for information about the factory. It had been a metal processing plant that closed in 2001 after several workplace accidents. But what really chilled me was a local news article from 3 years ago that mentioned the discovery of human remains in the building. The article was vague, saying only that police were investigating. We haven't gone exploring since then. Sometimes I wonder if that man is still there, waiting for the next curious visitors. Sometimes I wonder if he was even human at all. Those eyes still haunt me. I know that sounds dramatic, but something about him just felt wrong. I've never felt such pure terror as I did in that moment when he lunged at me. If that door had been any heavier, if I'd been a second slower, I don't want to think about what might have happened. All I know is that we were being watched from the moment we entered that building, and something was waiting for one of us to wander off alone. Story 5. I still can't believe what happened to me last month. I've been trying to make sense of it, but I just can't. I need to write this down somewhere because I'm going crazy, keeping it all bottled up inside. So I live in Oakfield, this quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever happens. The kind of place where everyone waves to each other while getting the mail, you know? My garage had gotten really out of hand over the years. Boxes of old Christmas decorations, my ex's tools he never came back for, clothes I hadn't worn in years. It was getting to the point where I could barely get my car in there. I decided to have a yard sale on a Saturday in May. The weather was perfect, sunny but not too hot. I spent all Friday evening dragging stuff out and setting up tables in the driveway. I even made a cute little sign with prices. My neighbor Jen helped me set up and promised to stop by during the sale, but she couldn't stay to help because her kid had a soccer game. The morning started out great. I put out some coffee and donuts, maybe a cheesy yard sale cliche, but whatever. Turned on some music, and by 8:30 I had a decent crowd. Mostly neighbors and some people who'd seen my posts on Nextdoor and Facebook Marketplace. This older couple bought a bunch of kitchen stuff, and this mom with 2 little girls went through all my old jewelry boxes. Normal yard sale stuff. It was probably around 10 when I first noticed him. A guy in his 30s or 40s wearing jeans, a gray t-shirt, and a Dodgers baseball cap pulled low. Nothing remarkable about him really, except he wasn't from the neighborhood, and he was just standing there at first, not really looking at anything, just observing. I didn't think much of it initially. Yard sales attract all types. Eventually, he started picking up items, mostly tools and some electronics. He'd examine them really carefully, turning them over in his hands, but never asking any questions like normal shoppers do. No, does this work? Or, would you take 5 for this? Nothing. Complete silence. His presence started to make me uncomfortable, but I couldn't exactly ask him to leave. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just browsing. But something about him felt off. The way he moved was too deliberate, too calculated, and I swear he was watching me more than the merchandise. By 11:30, the crowd had thinned out considerably. Most of the good stuff was gone, and I was thinking about wrapping things up early. A few people were still browsing, but the man in the Dodgers cap was still there, lingering at the edge of my driveway. Every time I looked up, his eyes would dart away. His voice, when he finally spoke, startled me. "Nice tools," he said, picking up a screwdriver set. His voice was flat, emotionless, no inflection at all. "Yeah, they were my ex's," I replied, trying to sound casual while my heart pounded. "Everything's half price now if you're interested." He didn't respond, just kept touching different items, but I noticed he wasn't really looking at them anymore. He was looking at me. His eyes would follow as I moved around the tables, rearranging things and talking to the few remaining shoppers. By noon, everyone else had left. Just me and Dodgers cap guy. I started packing up boxes, making it obvious the sale was ending. "Sale's over," I called out to him, trying to sound confident. "I'm closing up now." He didn't move, just stood there in my driveway watching me. I grabbed a box of books and headed to the garage, feeling his eyes on my back the entire time. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the box. When I turned around to head back to the driveway, he was closer, much closer, and he was holding a hammer, one of the ones from my sail. The air felt thick suddenly, hard to breathe. I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler going and kids playing somewhere down the street, but they felt a million miles away. "I need to finish packing up now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to put that down and leave." Something changed in his face then, a subtle shift. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I knew that something bad was about to happen. Maybe he'd been planning it all along, or maybe something in my tone set him off. I don't know, but in that moment, I saw something terrifying flash across his face. He lunged at me so fast I barely had time to react. The hammer swung through the air where my head had been half a second earlier. I stumbled backward, nearly falling off the edge of the driveway onto the lawn. "What the hell?" I screamed, hoping a neighbor would hear. "Help!" He didn't say anything. That's what keeps haunting me. He didn't say a single word, just this determined, emotionless expression as he came at me again, hammer raised. I turned to run toward the garage, thinking I could lock myself inside, but he caught my arm. His grip was like iron, digging into my skin. I twisted hard, feeling something in my shoulder pull painfully, but broke free. Then I tripped over that stupid box of books I'd just set down. I went sprawling across the concrete of the garage floor, the wind knocked out of me. I rolled over to see him standing over me, hammer raised high. Pure instinct took over. My hand found something heavy and metal on the floor beside me, a wrench that must have fallen out of one of the boxes. I didn't think, just swung it upward with everything I had. It connected with his shoulder with a sickening thud. He grunted, the first sound I'd heard him make, and staggered back a step. It wasn't enough to take him down, but it gave me the seconds I needed. I scrambled to my feet and ran like hell for my front door, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him right behind me with that hammer. After what felt like forever, the door opened and I fell inside, slamming it shut and locking it. Then the deadbolt, then the chain. I ran through the house, locking every window, every door. Then I grabbed my phone and called 911, hiding in my bathroom with the door locked. 911, what's your emergency? I was crying so hard I could barely speak. There's a man, he attacked me with a hammer in my driveway, yard sale. The dispatcher kept me on the line while police were dispatched. She asked if I could see him through any windows. Trembling, I peeked through my bathroom blinds, which faced the front yard. He was gone. The hammer was lying in the middle of my driveway. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. They took my statement, searched the area, put out an alert for a man matching his description. They were kind and thorough, but I could tell they didn't have much hope of finding him. No security cameras on my street, no witnesses, just my word against a ghost. That was 4 weeks ago. They never found him. I haven't slept well since. I installed a security system the very next day. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. I got new locks. I even adopted a big dog from the shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Rex, who barks at everything. But none of it helps with the nightmares. In them, I'm always back at that yard sale, and he's always there at the edge of my driveway, just watching. Sometimes I wake up convinced he's standing outside my bedroom window. The bruises on my arm faded after a couple weeks, but the invisible ones haven't. I jump at every noise. I check the locks 3-4 times before bed. I can't bring myself to park in the garage anymore. Something about that enclosed space makes me feel trapped. The worst part is not knowing why. Was I specifically targeted? Had he been watching me before the yard sale? Was it random? Will he come back to finish whatever he started? The detective assigned to my case calls every week, but there's never any news. These types of random attacks are rare, he says, trying to reassure me. But they're also difficult to solve without more evidence. Yesterday, I was bringing in groceries when I noticed something on my porch that made my blood run cold. A Dodgers cap placed neatly by my front door. I dropped the bags and ran inside, called the police again. They came, took the hat as evidence, increased patrols in my neighborhood. Could be kids playing a prank, the officer suggested. Word gets around about incidents like yours. But I know better. He's telling me he can get to me anytime he wants. I'm writing this from my sister's house in another state. I left this morning, threw some clothes in a bag, and just drove. I don't know if I'm ever going back to that house. How could I? Every time I look at that driveway, I'll see him standing there with that hammer. I keep thinking about how something as ordinary as a yard sale turned into the most terrifying day of my life. How quickly safety can be shattered. How a stranger decided to destroy my peace of mind, and I'll never know why. The police said to call if I remember any other details, but what's left to remember? His expressionless face, the sound of the hammer swinging through air, the way my wrench felt connecting with his shoulder, the lock clicking behind me as I escaped by seconds. I checked the locks here too. My sister thinks I'm being paranoid, but she didn't see his eyes. She doesn't wake up certain that he's standing at the foot of her bed. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't found that wrench. Story 6. I still can't sleep right. It's been 3 weeks since it happened, and every time I close my eyes, I hear that sound again. That scream. I'm writing this down because I need to tell someone, and my therapist thinks it might help to get it all out. Maybe one of you has experienced something similar, or can make sense of what we encountered out there. For context, I'm part of a small urban exploration group. Just me, my buddy James from college, and Charles, who we met through an Urbex forum about a year ago. Charles was always the most intense of us, always pushing to explore more remote and dangerous places. James and I were more casual about it. We enjoyed the adventure and the photography, but we had our limits. Charles didn't seem to have any. About a month ago, Charles started obsessing over this obscure Instagram account he'd found. The account posted coordinates and cryptic descriptions of abandoned mines throughout the Mojave Desert. No pictures of the interiors, just the entrances, old wooden structures, rusted metal frames, dark openings in rocky hillsides. The account had fewer than 200 followers, and the posts were infrequent, but Charles became fixated on it. "These are untouched spots, guys," he kept saying in our group chat. "Places no one's been in decades. Think about what we could find down there." James was hesitant. "Abandoned mines are dangerous as hell, man. Cave-ins, bad air, vertical shafts you can fall into." But Charles wouldn't let it go. He kept sending screenshots from the account, particularly focusing on one location the poster had described as deeper than records show. After 2 weeks of him bringing it up constantly, I finally caved. James followed suit a few days later. We planned the trip for a Saturday, April 16th. I drove my Jeep Wrangler since it was the only vehicle among us that could handle the off-road terrain. We packed more supplies than usual: extra flashlights, dust masks, gloves, first aid kits, plenty of water, protein bars, and a satellite phone since Charles warned us there'd be no cell service. We also brought helmets with mounted lights, something we'd never needed for our usual abandoned factory explorations. We left Las Vegas at 5 in the morning. Charles directed us using the coordinates he'd saved, taking us deeper and deeper into the desert. After 3 hours of driving, the last hour on unmarked dirt roads, even Charles started to look uncertain. "Should be around here somewhere," he muttered, checking his GPS for the 10th time in as many minutes. The landscape was brutal, all rock and sand and scrubby vegetation under a merciless sun. No signs of human activity anywhere. No old mining equipment, no structures, nothing that indicated anyone had ever been there before us. "Maybe we should head back," James suggested after we'd spent another hour searching. "This doesn't feel right." I was about to agree when Charles, who'd wandered about 50 yards ahead, suddenly called out, "I found something!" We hurried over to where he stood, pointing at what looked like weathered wooden beams sticking out from the side of a small rocky incline. We would have missed it completely if we weren't specifically looking for it. The wood was so sun-bleached and wind-worn, it almost matched the surrounding stone. As we got closer, I could see it was some kind of structural support framing a dark opening about 4 feet high. A mine entrance, partially collapsed and almost entirely reclaimed by the desert. "Holy shit," James whispered. "How old do you think this is?" Charles was already taking pictures and marking our location. Late 1800s, early 1900s maybe? This whole area was mining country back then. The entrance looked wrong somehow. I'm not usually the superstitious type, but standing there looking at that black hole in the earth, I felt a visceral sense of dread, like looking at the entrance to a predator's den and knowing, on some primal level, that you shouldn't go any closer. "Let's check our gear," Charles said, either not noticing or ignoring my hesitation. We put on our helmets, masks, and gloves, tested our lights, made sure our backpacks were secure. Charles went in first, ducking low to clear the entrance. James followed, and after taking one last look at the bright desert sky, I went in too. The temperature dropped immediately. The air felt stale and thick with dust, despite our masks. Our helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel that sloped gently downward. The walls were rough-hewn rock, with rotting wooden support beams every few feet. The floor was uneven, littered with rocks and debris. "Watch your step," Charles called back, his voice sounding flat and muffled in the tunnel. We made slow progress, moving deeper into the mine. The tunnel would occasionally branch, but Charles always chose the path that seemed to lead downward. I lost track of time, but it must have been about 20 minutes in when we reached a larger chamber. "This looks like a central workspace," Charles said, shining his light around. The chamber was maybe 30 feet across, with several tunnel openings leading off in different directions. There was old equipment scattered around, rusted metal parts, broken tools, rotting wooden crates. In the center was what looked like the remains of an old ore cart, tipped onto its side, one wheel missing. James took out his camera and started taking pictures. "This is actually pretty cool," he admitted. I was examining some faded markings on the wall when I first heard it. A faint scraping sound, like metal being dragged across stone. It came from one of the tunnels leading deeper into the mine. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. They both stopped and listened. For several seconds, there was complete silence. "Probably just settling rocks," Charles said. "These old mines make all kinds of noises." But then we heard it again, clearer this time. A slow, deliberate scraping, followed by a pause, then another scrape. "That's not settling rocks," James whispered. "Could be an animal," Charles suggested, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The scraping continued, growing slightly louder. It had a rhythm to it now: scrape, pause, scrape, pause. like something moving slowly toward us. "Let's check it out," Charles said, already moving toward the tunnel where the sound was coming from. "Are you insane?" James hissed. "We should be getting out of here." "It's probably nothing," Charles insisted, but his voice had an edge to it. "We came all this way. Don't you want to know?" I didn't. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't let Charles go alone, and I knew he would. So we followed him toward the sound. The tunnel narrowed as we went deeper, forcing us to walk single file. The scraping had stopped, but now I could hear something else, a soft, wet sound like breathing through fluid. The air felt different too, heavier, and with a smell our masks couldn't completely filter out. Something organic, like rotting meat. We'd gone maybe 50 feet down this tunnel when James, who was last in line, accidentally hit the switch on his flashlight, causing it to flare brightly for a second before he turned it off. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wet breathing sound had stopped. For 5, maybe 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then we heard the scream. I've never heard anything like it before, and I pray I never do again. It wasn't human, not even close, but it wasn't like any animal I've ever heard either. It was high-pitched and guttural at the same time, like something with vocal cords not designed for screaming trying to do exactly that. It echoed through the tunnel, seeming to come from everywhere at once. We ran. There was no discussion, no plan, pure instinct took over. Charles was in front, then me, then James. We scrambled back through the tunnel toward the central chamber, our helmet lights bouncing wildly, casting crazy shadows that made it seem like the walls themselves were moving. Behind us, the screaming stopped, replaced by a heavy, fast thumping, like something large moving quickly on multiple limbs. We reached the chamber and Charles hesitated, trying to remember which tunnel led back to the surface. I grabbed his shoulder and pointed to the one I thought we'd come from. As we started toward it, James yelled. I turned to see him stumbling, his light pointing downward at his feet, where his wallet had fallen from his pocket. Before I could shout at him to leave it, he bent to grab it. That's when I saw it, just for a split second, as my light swept across the chamber behind James. Something pale and glistening, moving low to the ground, much larger than a person. I caught a glimpse of too many limbs, an elongated shape, and what might have been eyes reflecting our light back as bright pinpoints. "Run!" I screamed. We bolted into the exit tunnel, hearing that wet, slithering movement behind us, closer now. The tunnel seemed longer on the way out, narrower, the air thicker. I tripped on something and went down hard, feeling a sharp pain as my foot caught on a jagged rock. My shoe came off, but there was no time to go back for it. I scrambled up and kept running in just my sock, feeling every rock and splinter through the thin fabric. I don't know how long we ran. Time lost all meaning. All I know is that eventually I saw light ahead, real, natural light, and we burst out of that mine entrance into the harsh desert sun, not stopping until we reached my Jeep. We piled in, Charles in the passenger seat screaming at me to drive, James in the back looking back toward the mine. I started the engine and floored it, bouncing and jolting over the rough terrain, not caring about the damage to my suspension or whether we were even heading in the right direction. All that mattered was putting distance between us and that place. After about 20 minutes of driving, when no one was following us and the adrenaline started to wear off, I had to stop. My foot was killing me, and when I looked down, I saw my sock was soaked with blood. "Jesus, man," James said when he saw it. "We need to get you to a hospital." My foot was full of splinters and cuts, some deep enough to need stitches. We found the nearest hospital, about 2 hours away, where I got patched up and received a tetanus shot. I told the doctor I'd lost my shoe while hiking and had to walk back to the car, barefoot. He looked skeptical, but didn't press for details. 3 days later, James realized he'd lost his wallet for real during our escape. After much debate, we decided to go back, in daylight, armed with a shotgun Charles borrowed from his uncle, and only to the entrance, not inside. When we arrived, the mine looked exactly the same, just an innocuous opening in the rocks. Nothing about it suggested the horror we'd experienced. We searched the area around the entrance, and that's when we found it. My missing shoe, about 10 feet from the mine opening. It was partially burned, as if it had been exposed to some kind of acid, and there were teeth marks on it, distinct, curved indentations that no animal I know of could have made. The sole was nearly bitten through in places. We left immediately, not even bothering to look for James's wallet. Charles tried contacting the Instagram account that had posted the coordinates, demanding to know what they knew about the mine and what was in it. The messages were read, but there was never any response. 2 days later, the account was deleted. I don't know what we encountered in that mine. I don't want to know. But I can't stop thinking about it, about what would have happened if James hadn't dropped his wallet, if we'd gone just a little deeper, or if we'd been just a little slower getting out. Sometimes I dream about those pinprick eyes reflecting in the darkness, and that scream, that inhuman scream that sounded almost like words, like it was trying to communicate something. I won't be going back to the Mojave. I won't be doing any more urban exploration either. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and some things should remain undiscovered. If you're reading this and you know anything about these mines or what might live in them, please tell me. Or if you've had a similar experience, I need to know I'm not losing my mind. And if you're thinking about exploring abandoned mines yourself, don't. Just don't. Bye. Story 7. I've been debating whether to share this for months now. I guess I need to get it off my chest, and maybe someone here has experienced something similar. My husband Miguel thinks I'm obsessing over it, but how can I not when it keeps happening? We bought our home on Long Island back in 2019, a beautiful colonial built in 1907 with all the charm and character you'd expect. High ceilings, ornate moldings, those gorgeous original hardwood floors that creak in just the right way. It needed work, sure, but we fell in love with it immediately. The previous owners had lived here for over 30 years and seemed eager to sell. They mentioned something about moving closer to their grandkids, but looking back, I wonder if there was more to it. The first incident happened about 3 months after we moved in. I had caught that awful flu going around and called in sick to work. Miguel had already left for the office, so I was alone in the house. Around noon, I decided to try to get some rest, so I went upstairs to our bedroom at the end of the hall. Our house has this weird layout with 2 staircases, the main one in the front and a narrower servant staircase in the back that leads up to the same second-floor landing. I had just gotten comfortable under the covers when I heard it. Footsteps coming up the main staircase. At first, I thought maybe Miguel had come home early to check on me, but that didn't make sense. He would have called out my name. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Each one made that distinct creak our stairs always make when you put weight on them. I counted them in my head, 13 steps to the landing. Then they stopped, for maybe 10 seconds. My heart was already racing. Then they started again, this time coming up the back staircase. 8 more steps, then silence at the landing. I was frozen in bed, unable to even call out. Then the footsteps started again, moving down the hallway toward our bedroom. They stopped right outside our door. I stared at the handle, waiting for it to turn, but it never did. Just silence. The feeling of dread was overwhelming, like something was standing there, waiting, listening. After what felt like forever, I worked up the courage to get up and check. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk. When I finally yanked the door open, the hallway was empty. I searched the entire house. Nothing was disturbed. All doors and windows were locked. I was completely alone. When Miguel got home that evening, I told him everything. He looked concerned, but ultimately chalked it up to me having a fever dream or being half asleep. "The house is old, Sarah," he said. "Old houses make noises." I let it go, but I knew what I heard. I wasn't asleep, and it wasn't the house settling. About a month later, Miguel texted me in the middle of a work day. "Something weird just happened," it read. He'd taken the day off to wait for a plumber, and while sitting in the living room, he heard the exact same thing I had described. Footsteps climbing both staircases, stopping at our bedroom door. He'd checked the entire house too. Nothing. That night, he apologized for not believing me. "I don't know what it was," he said, "but it wasn't the house settling. Those were footsteps." We talked about it, but ultimately decided it was just one of those weird things about living in an old house. Maybe weird acoustics or pipes. We even convinced ourselves it might be some kind of pressure change making the wood expand. We went months without another incident, and eventually it faded into the background of our lives. Then Ethan was born in January of 2021. Everything changed after that. The activity, whatever it was, seemed to intensify. It started small. Items we could have sworn we left in one place would turn up in another. The baby monitor would lose signal only in certain parts of the house. Cold spots in rooms that were otherwise warm. The worst incident happened when Ethan was about 4 months old. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was downstairs in the living room breastfeeding him. Miguel was asleep upstairs. I was exhausted, but finally getting Ethan to latch properly when I heard it again, footsteps. But this time, they were already upstairs, walking back and forth in the hallway above me. My blood ran cold. I knew Miguel was in our bedroom at the end of the hall. Was someone in our house? Was Miguel sleepwalking? I clutched Ethan tighter to my chest and tried to stay calm. The footsteps continued for about a minute, then stopped. I was too terrified to go upstairs, so I called Miguel's cell phone. It took him a few rings to answer, his voice groggy with sleep. "There's someone upstairs," I whispered. "In the hallway." He immediately went into protection mode. I heard him get out of bed through the phone. "I don't see anyone," he whispered back. "Let me check Ethan's room." I reminded him that Ethan was with me. He checked every room upstairs, then came down to the living room where I was sitting, still clutching our son, tears streaming down my face. "There's no one here, Sarah," he said, but his face was pale. But I heard it too when I opened our bedroom door. Footsteps, right at the other end of the hall, but there's nobody there. I refused to breastfeed downstairs after that. I wouldn't leave our bedroom at night for any reason unless Miguel was with me. We talked about moving, but the housing market had gone crazy during the pandemic, and we'd put so much money into renovations. Besides, part of me still tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noises, right? Then my mom came to visit from Arizona last summer. We hadn't told her about any of this. What was the point of worrying her? She was staying for 2 weeks to help with Ethan, who was now a toddler and a handful. On her 3rd night, Miguel and I went out for dinner, our first real date night in months. When we got home, my mom was sitting in the kitchen, a glass of wine untouched in front of her. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom, what's wrong? Is Ethan okay?" I rushed to ask. "Ethan's fine. He's asleep," she said. her voice shaking slightly. "But something happened while you were gone." She told us she had been sitting in the rocking chair in Ethan's room, holding him as he fell asleep. She heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate steps that stopped right outside Ethan's door. Then 3 loud bangs against the door, so forceful that the door shook in its frame. "I thought it was you two coming home early," she said. I called out, "Just a minute, I'm putting Ethan down." But no one answered. The banging came again, more insistent this time. My mom, worried now, gently laid Ethan in his crib and went to the door. When she opened it, the hallway was empty. She checked the entire upstairs. No one. All doors and windows still locked. "I've never believed in ghosts," my mom told us, her hands trembling around her wine glass. "But I don't know how to explain what happened." She slept in our room with us that night, on a mattress on the floor. The next day, she made an excuse about needing to get back home early for an appointment. I didn't blame her. She hasn't stayed overnight since. The small disturbances continued. Doors we knew we'd closed found open in the morning, lights turning on by themselves, the baby monitor picking up static and strange whispers we couldn't quite make out. We talked about getting the house blessed or bringing in some kind of paranormal investigator, but something always came up to prevent it. Work deadlines, Ethan getting sick, life getting in the way. Then, about 2 months ago, Ethan, now 2.5 and talking more every day, said something that made my skin crawl. He was playing in his room while I folded laundry on his bed. Out of nowhere, he looked up at his wall and said, "The walls talk to me, Mommy." I tried to keep my voice casual. "Oh yeah? What do they say, buddy?" He shrugged, already distracted by his toys again. "Nice things. Stories." I told Miguel about it that night. He seemed more curious than concerned. "Kids have imaginary friends all the time," he said. "It's normal." Maybe he was right, but then last week something happened that I still can't explain. Miguel's father passed away when Miguel was in college, long before I met him. He was a musician, with long hair he wore in a ponytail, and according to the photos I've seen, always wore this leather cord necklace with a small wing pendant. Miguel keeps a photo of him on our dresser. We were having breakfast, and Ethan was babbling about someone he called his other grandpa. At first, we thought he was talking about Miguel's stepfather, who lives in Florida and whom Ethan has only met twice. "No," Ethan insisted, "my other grandpa, the one with the long hair and the wings." Miguel and I locked eyes across the table. My heart was pounding. "Wings?" Miguel asked carefully. "Like angel wings?" Ethan nodded, mouth full of cereal. "On his neck, and he plays music for me when I sleep." I felt like I couldn't breathe. There's no way Ethan could know about that necklace. The photo on our dresser only shows Miguel's dad from the chest up, and the pendant isn't visible. "When does he come see you?" I managed to ask. "At night, and sometimes when I'm playing. He tells me to be careful on the stairs." Ethan said this so matter-of-factly, then asked to be excused to go play. That was 3 days ago. Last night I was awakened at exactly 3:17 in the morning by those same footsteps climbing both staircases. But this time, instead of stopping at our door, they continued down the hall to Ethan's room. I shook Miguel awake, and we both crept to our doorway. The footsteps had stopped. We hurried to Ethan's room and found him sound asleep, peaceful, with no sign that anything was amiss. As we turned to leave, we both felt it, a sudden drop in temperature and the overwhelming sense that we weren't alone. The air in the doorway felt thick, almost like walking through water. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. I don't know what to think anymore. Is our house haunted? Is it Miguel's father watching over his grandson? Why the angry banging when my mother was here? Why the footsteps that fill me with such dread? If it's a protective spirit, why does it feel so threatening sometimes? We're still here, in this beautiful old house with its creaking stairs and its secrets. Ethan seems unbothered by his other grandpa, but I still can't shake the feeling that something is watching us, waiting. Every night, I listen for those footsteps, and every night, they come. Story 8. I still get chills when I think about that night during the pandemic lockdown. It was summer of 2020, and like everyone else, we were going completely stir-crazy in our house in suburban Austin. My parents, my sister Megan, and I had been cooped up together for almost 4 months straight by that point. I was 17, Megan was 15, and we were both sick of Zoom school, sick of seeing the same walls every day, and definitely sick of each other. Dad came up with what seemed like a brilliant idea at the time, camping in our backyard. We have this decent-sized yard that backs up to a quiet street. There's a 6-foot wooden privacy fence around it, and a flat, grassy area that would be perfect for setting up tents. Mom was immediately on board. She kept saying how it would be an adventure without leaving home and other cheesy mom stuff like that. But honestly, I was excited too. Just something different, you know. We spent all day Saturday getting ready. Dad dug out our 2 tents from the garage and aired them out in the sun. They were a bit musty from sitting unused for years, but nothing too bad. Mom went to the store for supplies. She came back with ingredients for s'mores, hot dogs for roasting, and these battery-powered lanterns that looked pretty cool. We even found our old sleeping bags in the attic. They smelled weird but seemed okay otherwise. By late afternoon, we had everything staged and ready in the living room. The plan was to set everything up after dinner, around 9 o'clock, and then spend the night under the stars. Well, under the light pollution of Austin, but whatever. We'd watch movies on Dad's tablet, eat junk food, and pretend we weren't just 20 feet from our actual beds. We were eating dinner around 7 when Megan started acting weird. She barely touched her food, which was the first red flag. My sister can usually eat more than me despite being smaller. Then she said she felt hot, and Mom immediately went into pandemic panic mode. Do you have a fever? Does your throat hurt? Can you taste the food? She peppered Megan with questions while feeling her forehead. I just don't feel good, Megan mumbled. My stomach hurts and I'm tired. Dad looked disappointed. Should we postpone the camping trip? I was annoyed, to be honest. Megan had been excited about this all day, and now suddenly she was sick. It felt like she was just trying to ruin our plans. She always got weird and anxious about new things. I think we should, Mom said, looking worried. If she's coming down with something, she needs to rest in her bed, and we shouldn't all be crammed in tents together if she might be contagious. I'm sorry, Megan said, looking genuinely upset. We can do it another night. Dad sighed but nodded. Better safe than sorry these days. Let's pack everything up and try again next weekend. I remember rolling my eyes dramatically. Great. Another boring night in this house. Thanks, Megan. Mom shot me a warning look, but I didn't care. I was pissed. This was the one thing I'd been looking forward to all week, and now it was ruined. We spent the next hour putting everything away. The tents went back in their bags, the sleeping bags back in the attic, and the snacks into the pantry. By 11 o'clock, we were all in our beds, like every other boring night of lockdown. I remember checking Instagram for a while, seeing all these posts from people finding ways to have fun despite everything, and feeling sorry for myself. I fell asleep around 11:30, still annoyed at my sister. The crash woke me up at exactly 12:33. I remember checking my phone when I bolted upright in bed. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard before. First came the screech of tires, this horrible rubber-on-asphalt sound that seemed to go on forever. Then a series of thuds, followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood and twisting metal. My room faces the backyard, and my window was open because it was a warm night. I jumped out of bed and ran to look outside. What I saw makes my stomach turn even now. There was a car, a dark sedan, sitting in our backyard. The wooden fence was completely destroyed on the far side, with splintered boards scattered across the grass. The car had plowed straight through it and come to rest exactly in the middle of the yard, exactly where our tents would have been. I couldn't process what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to put the tents back in the scene, to imagine us sleeping there when this car came crashing through at full speed. My dad burst into my room. "Stay inside," he yelled, already heading for the back door. My mom appeared in the hallway, looking terrified. "What happened?" she asked, pulling her robe tight around her. "A car crashed through our fence. It's in the backyard," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. Megan appeared behind Mom, her eyes wide with fear. "Are we being attacked?" "No, honey, it's just an accident," Mom said, but she didn't sound convinced. We all moved to the kitchen window, which gave us the best view of the backyard. Dad had turned on the exterior lights, illuminating the bizarre scene. The car was still running, its headlights cutting through the night, pointing at the back of our house. Steam or smoke was rising from the hood. Then the interior light of the car clicked on. I could see a man inside, moving slowly. He was skinny, with dark hair that stuck up at odd angles. He seemed to be looking around, confused, like he couldn't figure out where he was. "I'm calling 911, Mom said, grabbing her phone from the counter. The man opened the car door and stumbled out. Even from inside, I could tell something was off about the way he moved. He took a few unsteady steps, then seemed to notice our house for the first time. He stared at it for a moment, swaying slightly, then started walking toward us. "He's coming to the house," I said, my voice rising in panic. Dad moved to the back door and locked it. "Stay back from the windows," he ordered. The man's walk was all wrong, jerky and uncoordinated. As he got closer to the house, I could see his face in the security lights. His eyes were unfocused, and there was something about his expression that made my skin crawl. He wasn't injured from the crash as far as I could tell, but he definitely wasn't right. He reached our back patio and started pounding on the door, not knocking, pounding with his fist, hard enough that the whole door shook. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice slurred and angry. "Hey! Open up!" Mom was talking to the 911 dispatcher, her voice shaking as she gave our address. Dad stood in front of us, like he was preparing to fight if the man got in. The pounding continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute or two. Then the man started talking again, his words running together. "Need some help. Car's fucked. You gotta help me." Then he tried the doorknob, rattling it hard. When it didn't open, he cursed loudly and kicked the door. I've never been so scared in my life. There was something deeply wrong about this man, not just that he was drunk or high, but something in his eyes that seemed empty, dangerous. Megan was crying silently beside me. I put my arm around her, trying to be brave, but I was terrified too. What if he broke the door down? What if he had a weapon? Just as the man started pounding on the door again, we heard sirens in the distance. He heard them too and stopped abruptly. He stood there for a moment, swaying, then turned and stumbled back toward his car. The police arrived faster than I expected, less than 5 minutes after Mom's call. 2 patrol cars pulled up on the street behind our house, their lights flashing through the broken fence. The man was trying to get back in his car when the officers approached him, guns drawn, shouting commands. I watched as they ordered him to the ground. He didn't comply at first, arguing with them, his body language aggressive even from a distance. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to fight the police. But then he finally dropped to his knees and then to the ground, where the officers handcuffed him. We gave our statements to the police that night. They told us the man was heavily intoxicated, probably on multiple substances. They estimated he'd been driving at least 90 miles per hour down our quiet residential street when he lost control and crashed through our fence. It wasn't until the next morning that we learned the rest. One of the officers came back to follow up and check on us. He told my parents that they'd found a loaded handgun in the car's center console. The man had a history of violent offenses and was on probation. He shouldn't have had a gun, shouldn't have been driving, shouldn't have been anywhere near our home. Standing in the daylight, looking at the torn-up yard, the shattered fence, the deep tire tracks in the grass, I couldn't stop thinking about what would have happened if Megan hadn't gotten sick. We would have been sleeping right there in tents made of thin nylon, completely vulnerable. The car would have plowed into us at 90 miles per hour before we even had time to wake up. And if by some miracle any of us had survived the initial impact, we would have been faced with a heavily armed, intoxicated, and clearly unstable man. We would have been little human burritos, ready to be destroyed by this drunk driver. That's how I've thought about it ever since. Us wrapped up in our sleeping bags, completely helpless. Later that day, I hugged Megan and apologized for being mad at her. "You saved our lives by getting sick," I told her. She gave me a strange look. "I wasn't actually sick," she whispered. "I just had a really bad feeling about sleeping outside, like a weird sense that something bad would happen. But I didn't want to sound crazy, so I pretended my stomach hurt." I get goosebumps every time I think about that. What made her feel that way? What made her listen to that feeling? I don't know if it was intuition or guardian angels or just dumb luck, but something made my sister lie about being sick that night, and that lie saved all our lives. Every time I hear a car screech now, my heart stops. Every time I see a fence like the one we used to have, I imagine it splintering into 1,000 pieces. And every night, I thank whatever force in the universe made my sister have that bad feeling just in time. Story 9. I've never actually shared this before, but what happened to me and my buddies back in '96 still gives me nightmares. I need to get this off my chest because I'm still trying to process how close we came to being murdered. I was stationed at Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, working as a communications specialist. I was 24 at the time, a kid from Mississippi who joined up because there wasn't much else going on back home. The base was pretty isolated, and after a few months, the monotony really starts to eat at you. Same faces, same buildings, same damn cactus and scrubland everywhere you look. My buddies Seabass and Kay were in the same boat. Seabass got his nickname because he once ate 4 plates of fish at the mess hall on a dare. Kay was the only woman in our friend group, super sharp and could outshoot most of the guys on base. We were all going stir-crazy that April, so we decided to take a weekend trip to Austin. Nothing fancy, just get the hell away from base for a couple days, hit some bars, see some live music, feel like normal 20-somethings for once. It was a Friday afternoon when we left. I remember because we'd been counting down the minutes till our weekend passes started. We took my car, this old Chevy Impala I'd bought cheap from a guy leaving the service. It wasn't much to look at, but it ran okay, and the AC worked, which was all that mattered in Texas. Kay had slapped some military stickers on my bumper when she'd been drunk one night. The Air Force emblem and some unit thing. I'd been meaning to take them off but never got around to it. We left base around 3 in the afternoon. The plan was to get to Austin before dark, find the cheap motel we'd booked, and then hit 6th Street. The first hour of the drive was exactly what we needed. Windows down, radio up, laughing about the dumbass officers on base. We were on this long stretch of highway, hardly any other cars around. Just empty road cutting through flat scrubland. I was driving, Seabass riding shotgun, and Kay stretched out in the back seat. We'd just passed this little nothing town, maybe 45 minutes outside of San Angelo, when Seabass started glancing in the side mirror. "Hey, Arthie, that Tahoe's been behind us for a while now," he said, not sounding worried yet, just noticing. I checked my rear view. Sure enough, there was a dark-colored Chevy Tahoe, maybe 50 yards back. I hadn't paid it any attention before. "Probably. Just heading the same way," I said, but I kept an eye on it. About 5 minutes later, Seabass nudged me. "Dude, they're getting closer." The Tahoe had closed the gap and was riding our ass now, maybe 20 feet behind us. I couldn't see the driver clearly through my mirror. The sun was hitting their windshield, but something about it felt off. "Should I speed up?" I asked. Before anyone could answer, the Tahoe suddenly lit up with flashing lights. Not the full light bar you'd see on a marked police cruiser, but the kind of flashers that might be mounted inside an unmarked car. My stomach dropped. "Shit, it's a cop," Kay said, sitting up in the back seat. I pulled over onto the shoulder, my mind racing through what I could have done wrong. I wasn't speeding. The car was registered. We were all sober. The Tahoe pulled up behind us, staying back a bit farther than cops usually do. I reached for my wallet to get my license ready. "Something doesn't feel right," Seabass muttered, looking back. I glanced in the mirror and saw a man get out. He was wearing what looked like tactical gear, dark pants with cargo pockets, a dark shirt, and some kind of vest. But there was no police patch, no badge visible from where I could see. He had on sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. "Where's his uniform?" Kay whispered from the back. The man approached slowly, hand resting near his hip, where I could see what looked like a holstered pistol. He came up to my window, and I rolled it down, trying to look casual. "Afternoon, officer," I said, using my best respectful voice. "Did I do something wrong?" He didn't answer right away, just stood there looking at me, then scanning the inside of the car. His face was expressionless. "License and registration," he finally said. His voice was flat, no accent I could place. I handed them over, noticing my hand was shaking slightly. He looked at my license for way too long, then at me, then back at the license. "Where you folks headed?" he asked. "Austin, sir," I replied. "Weekend trip." He nodded slowly, still scanning the car interior. "You all military?" The question struck me as odd. Why would he ask that right off the bat? "Yes, sir," I answered. "We're stationed at Goodfellow." His eyes narrowed slightly behind the sunglasses. He looked back at his vehicle, then waved. To my horror, 2 more men got out of the Tahoe. They were dressed similarly, dark clothes, tactical-looking gear, but nothing that definitively said police. One was tall and lanky, the other shorter, but built like a linebacker. "Step out of the vehicle, please," the first man said. My heart was hammering now. "Sir, may I ask what this is about?" "Just step out of the vehicle," he repeated, his tone hardening. I looked at Seabass, who gave me a slight nod. I opened my door slowly and got out, feeling exposed on the empty highway. The other 2 men were standing by the Tahoe, watching us. The first guy walked me to the back of my car, positioning himself so he could see both me and my friends inside. "Where'd you say you were going again?" he asked. "Austin," I repeated. "Weekend leave from base." He looked at my bumper, and I followed his gaze to Kay's military stickers. "This your car?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Bought it about 6 months ago." "Why don't you have your friends step out too?" My mouth went dry. "Is that necessary? We haven't done anything wrong." He didn't answer, just called over to the car. "Everyone out." Seabass and Kay slowly got out. Kay looked terrified, and Seabass had this hard look on his face like he was getting ready for something bad to happen. The officer walked over to Kay, looking at her up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "These your stickers?" he asked, nodding toward the bumper. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "I'm Air Force Security Forces." Something changed in the man's demeanor. He glanced back at his companions, and they exchanged looks I couldn't read. The atmosphere shifted. "So all 3 of you are military?" he asked, looking at each of us. "Yes, sir," Seabass answered firmly. "Active duty Air Force." The man took a step back, removed his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, calculating. He looked like he was making a decision. "Well," he said finally, his voice different now, almost casual. "Seems like there's been a misunderstanding. Thought your vehicle matched a description we had, but I can see that's not the case." He handed me back my license and registration. "Sorry for the inconvenience. You folks drive safe now." Just like that, he turned and walked back to the Tahoe. The other 2 men were already getting in. They didn't use a radio, didn't write anything down, didn't check my plates. Nothing a real cop would do. "What the hell was that?" Kay whispered as we watched them pull away. We stood there on the roadside for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I felt sick to my stomach. "Those weren't cops," Seabass said finally. "No way in hell." We debated what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around and go straight back to base, but we had no proof of anything. What would we even report? That some weird guys pulled us over? In the end, we decided to continue to Austin, but we were on edge the whole way. We kept checking the mirrors, jumping every time we saw a dark SUV. When we finally got to Austin, we didn't even go out that night. Just sat in our motel room, replaying what had happened, trying to convince ourselves we were overreacting. The weekend was ruined, and we headed back to base early Sunday morning, taking a different route just to be safe. We talked about reporting the incident when we got back, but without a plate number or any real evidence, it seemed pointless. So we tried to put it behind us. Then, a week later, Seabass burst into my room, his face white as a sheet. "Turn on the news," he said. "Channel 4 now." I did, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The reporter was standing on a familiar stretch of highway, talking about a young couple who'd been found murdered in a ditch about 30 miles outside San Angelo. Their car had been abandoned on the roadside. Police were investigating, but had few leads. The only unusual detail was that a stolen black Tahoe had been found abandoned about 10 miles from the scene. The timestamp on the murders. The Friday night we'd been pulled over. I couldn't breathe. Seabass and I stared at each other, both knowing what this meant. We called Kay immediately, and the 3 of us went straight to the local police to report what had happened to us. The detective who took our statement looked grim. He asked if we could identify the men if we saw them again, but I wasn't sure. It had all happened so fast, and the main guy had kept his sunglasses on most of the time. They took our information and said they'd be in touch, but I never heard anything definitive after that. It's been over 25 years, and I still check my rearview mirror obsessively when I'm driving on empty highways. I still get cold sweats when I see a dark Tahoe behind me. But what haunts me most is knowing that the only reason we're alive today is because of Kay's military stickers and our military IDs. Those men, whoever they were, had targeted us for something horrible, but changed their minds when they realized we were active duty military. Maybe they thought we'd be missed too quickly. Maybe they thought military personnel would bring too much heat. Whatever their reasoning, Kay's drunken decision to slap those stickers on my bumper saved our lives. I don't know if they ever caught those men. I don't know if the case was solved. All I know is that for a few terrifying minutes on a deserted Texas highway, my friends and I looked death in the face without even realizing it. And sometimes late at night, I still wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been wearing our military IDs that day. Story 10. I've been a research assistant at the university for almost 4 years now. It's usually a pretty mundane job, cataloging samples, maintaining equipment, occasionally joining field expeditions. Nothing that would make for interesting conversation at parties. Until 3 days ago, that is. Our team had planned a routine sampling expedition to collect data on urban forest ecology. We're studying how plant communities adapt to the fringes of human development. The forest we chose sits about 20 minutes from downtown, technically within city limits, but feeling a world away once you're inside. I've been there dozens of times before without incident. It's popular enough that you'll see joggers, dog walkers, the occasional family on weekends, but not so crowded that you can't find peace. There were 5 of us that day: Dr. Matthews, our lead researcher, Annika and Marco, both PhD students, Emily, another research assistant like me, and myself. We loaded up the department's old Subaru with our equipment around 7 in the morning. I remember being annoyed because I'd stayed up late the night before finishing some data entry, and the coffee in my travel mug tasted burnt. The weather was perfect for field work, partly cloudy, around 70 degrees, with a light breeze. We parked at the main trailhead around 8:30. It wasn't particularly busy, just a couple of cars in the lot and an older man walking his golden retriever. Nothing that raised any red flags. Dr. Matthews wanted to explore a less trafficked area where the forest meets an abandoned industrial zone. We'd never sampled there before, but satellite imagery showed some interesting vegetation patterns. We gathered our equipment, laptops for data entry, specialized cameras for plant documentation, soil sampling kits, GPS units, the works. Probably about $20,000 worth of gear between us, not counting our personal phones and wallets. The main trail was well maintained, but after about 40 minutes of hiking, we veered onto a narrower path that looked like it hadn't seen much use lately. Brambles scratched at my legs despite my hiking pants. I remember Emily complaining about spider webs in her hair. The isolation felt appropriate for our work though, undisturbed nature, exactly what we needed to study. We'd been working for maybe 2 hours, spread out in a small clearing about 30 feet across. I was kneeling by a particularly interesting fungal growth, photographing it and taking notes, when Annika said something like, "Oh, hello there." Her tone was friendly but surprised. I looked up to see 2 men standing at the edge of our clearing. They were so ordinary looking. One was maybe in his 30s, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. The other was older, probably mid-40s, with a baseball cap and a faded green jacket. They could have been anybody, your neighbors, guys you'd stand behind in line at the grocery store without a second thought. At first, I thought they were just hikers who'd stumbled upon us. Dr. Matthews started to explain what we were doing, something about urban ecology research. when the mood shifted so abruptly it made my stomach drop. The younger guy pulled out a gun. Not dramatically like in movies. It was almost casual, like he was showing us his phone or something. But it was unmistakably a handgun, black and serious looking. The older man produced one too, holding it loosely at his side. Phones, wallets, bags, everything now. The younger one spoke flatly, like he was asking for the time. There's this weird moment of disbelief when something like this happens. Your brain doesn't want to process it. I actually remember thinking it might be a joke, or that they were park rangers with some strange protocol. But Dr. Matthews' face went completely white, and that's when I knew this was very real. Emily started crying immediately. Not loudly, just this terrible, quiet sobbing. She's only 23, the youngest on our team. This was her second field expedition ever. "Shut her up," the older man said, gesturing toward Emily with his gun. Annika moved closer to her, putting an arm around her shoulders while whispering something. But Emily was starting to hyperventilate. I could see her chest heaving, her eyes wide with panic. She has anxiety issues. She'd mentioned it once during a department happy hour. This situation was her worst nightmare. I said, "Shut her up." The older man took 2 steps toward them, and I genuinely thought he might hit Emily. Marco spoke up then, his voice surprisingly steady. "She's having a panic attack. She can't help it. We're cooperating, see?" He slowly reached for his backpack and held it out. The younger man snatched it, then gestured for everyone else to do the same. We all complied. What else could we do? I handed over my pack containing my laptop, camera equipment, and sample containers. Then my phone, then my wallet. They took everything from all of us, methodically checking our pockets too. The whole time, I kept glancing toward the trail we'd come from. We weren't that far from the main path. Surely someone would come by. And that's when something happened that disturbed me almost as much as the robbery itself. A man and woman, probably in their 50s, appeared at the edge of the clearing. They were wearing matching North Face jackets and carrying walking poles. They took one look at what was happening. 5 scared researchers with their hands up, 2 men holding guns, and the woman tugged at her partner's sleeve. Without a word, they backed away and hurried down another trail fork. They saw us. They knew we were in danger, and they just left. The younger robber noticed too and laughed. "Smart folks," he said. "Mind your business. Live longer." Emily's breathing was getting worse. Her face had gone alarmingly red, and she was making a wheezing sound that scared me. Dr. Matthews tried to speak calmly. "She needs her inhaler. It's in the front pocket of her backpack." The older man rummaged through Emily's bag, found the inhaler, and tossed it at her feet. Annika helped her use it, and gradually her breathing steadied, though she continued trembling violently. While this was happening, I noticed 2 more hikers appear briefly at the trail junction. They took in the scene and immediately retreated, just like the couple before them. No one was going to help us. We were alone. The men were efficient. They sorted through our belongings quickly, keeping the electronics and wallets, dumping sample containers and papers on the ground. I watched years of research get scattered across the dirt and felt a bizarre anger cutting through my fear. Not at the robbery itself, but at the casual disregard for our work. "Which way did you come from?" the younger one asked, gesturing with his gun toward the various trail options. Dr. Matthews pointed toward the main trail. The men nodded at each other. Then the older one said, "You're going to count to 500, out loud, all of you together. If we hear you stop, or if anyone follows us, we'll come back. Understand?" We nodded. What choice did we have? "Start counting," he said, backing away with our belongings stuffed into our own backpacks. 1, 2, 3, we began, our voices shaking in an absurd chorus. The men disappeared down the trail with everything except the clothes on our backs and Emily's inhaler. We counted to about 50 before stopping. No one was going to chase armed robbers through the woods. We stood in stunned silence for a moment, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. "Is everyone okay?" Dr. Matthews finally asked, his voice hoarse. We nodded, though okay wasn't the right word. Physically unharmed, yes. But okay? Not even close. The walk back to the car was nightmarish. Every rustle in the undergrowth made me flinch. We passed other hikers who smiled and nodded pleasantly, completely unaware of what had just happened to us. I wanted to scream at them, to ask why no one had helped us, but I kept silent. At the parking lot, we found a family unpacking hiking gear from their minivan. Dr. Matthews approached them and asked to borrow a phone to call the police. The father looked suspicious until he saw our faces. Then he handed over his phone without question. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They took our statements, asked for descriptions, but I could tell they weren't optimistic about recovering our belongings. One officer kept saying things like, "Usually these cases are difficult to solve," and "You're lucky they just wanted your stuff." Lucky, as if having guns pointed at us was some kind of good fortune. We spent hours at the police station filing reports. I kept thinking about the people who had seen us, seen our danger, and walked away. How many others had done the same thing in similar situations? Was this what humanity had come to? It's been 3 days now. The university is replacing our equipment, and our credit cards and IDs have been canceled and reissued. But I can't shake the feeling that followed me out of those woods. The vulnerability, the realization that in a moment of crisis, people chose to protect themselves rather than help. I haven't been sleeping well. When I close my eyes, I see the casual way that gun appeared, how ordinary those men looked, how quickly our normal day dissolved into terror. Emily has taken medical leave and is seeing a therapist. Marco acts like he's fine, but I noticed his hands shaking when he picked up a coffee mug yesterday. I always thought of myself as someone who would help others in danger. Now, I'm not so sure. Would I have been brave enough to intervene if I'd seen what those hikers saw? Or would I have turned away too? The police called yesterday. Someone found our backpacks dumped in a ravine about a mile from where we were robbed. The electronics and wallets were gone, of course, but they recovered some of our research notes. Small comfort. I'm going back to the lab tomorrow. Life goes on, apparently. But something fundamental has changed for me. I used to feel safe in those woods. I used to trust that in a crowd, someone would help if things went wrong. I used to believe that the world generally made sense. Now I know better. Danger doesn't announce itself. It walks up wearing ordinary clothes on an ordinary day. And when it appears, you might find yourself completely alone, even in a crowded forest. Story 11. This happened about 2 months ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. I'm finally at a point where I can talk about it without freaking out completely, but I still check my doors and windows obsessively and sleep with a baseball bat next to my bed. I moved to this small town in Brazil last year for work. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, except me, since I'm the outsider. I'm renting this 2-story house that's way too big for just me, but it was the only decent place available when I arrived. The rent is cheap because it's old and needs some work, but I don't mind. The important thing is that I have good internet for gaming, which has basically become my social life. Most evenings after work, I'd get online with my friends back home to play whatever game we were into that week. That night, we were in the middle of a Valorant match when the storm started picking up. I remember checking my phone during a quick break between rounds and seeing a flash flood warning, but I didn't think much of it. We get those alerts all the time during rainy season, and nothing serious ever happens. Around 11 that night, I was in my office upstairs, completely focused on the game. My friends' voices were coming through my headset, and we were all hyped because we were actually winning for once. Then the wind got really bad. I mean really bad. The whole house started making these awful creaking sounds, like it was about to come apart. The windows were rattling, and I could hear things hitting the roof, probably branches or debris flying around. "Guys, this storm is getting insane," I told my friends on Discord. "I might lose connection if it gets worse." They were all like, "Don't you dare disconnect in the middle of this match." We were laughing about it, but then my screen flickered. The lights in my office did too. Everything went dark for a second, then came back on. "Whoa, power just blinked," I said. "I think I might..." And then everything shut down. Complete darkness. My computer, my monitors, the lights, everything. The only illumination came from my phone screen. The silence was immediate and jarring after all the game noise and my friends' voices in my ears. I texted the group chat, "Power's out. Storm knocked everything out. Can't get back online tonight, sorry guys." I sat there for a minute, waiting for the power to come back, but nothing happened. My office is at the front of the house, so I went to the window to see if the whole neighborhood was affected. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it hard to see anything, but it looked like some houses still had lights on. I decided to check the breaker box, which is in the basement. Now, I don't go down there much because it's unfinished and kind of creepy. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, old junk the previous tenants left behind. I used my phone flashlight to navigate down the 2 flights of stairs, main floor to ground floor, then ground floor to basement. The basement was freezing and smelled like mildew. I found an old battery power bank I'd forgotten about on a shelf, which was a nice surprise. It still had some charge, so I connected it to a small LED lamp I had down there. At least now I wouldn't have to drain my phone battery using the flashlight. As I was heading toward the breaker box on the far wall, I thought I heard something behind me, like a shuffling sound. I spun around, but the lamp only illuminated a small area, and the rest of the basement was pitch black. I convinced myself it was just the storm. Old houses make all kinds of noises when it's windy. I checked the breaker box, but nothing was tripped. This was weird because if lightning had caused the outage, usually at least one breaker would be flipped. I tried resetting the main switch anyway, but nothing happened. The power was definitely out from the street. I grabbed the lamp and headed back upstairs. I kept thinking I heard noises behind me, but every time I turned around, nothing was there. Just shadows playing tricks on me. Back on the main floor, I went to the front window again. Now I could see more clearly that houses across the street definitely had power. This didn't make sense. If it was a local outage, it should affect at least the whole block, right? I tried calling the power company, but their automated system just said they were aware of scattered outages and were working to restore service. No estimated time for when my power would be back. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Emergency alert. Power outages reported in your area due to severe weather. Crews working to restore service. Estimated repair time, 6 to 8 hours. Stay indoors and avoid basement areas due to potential flooding." Something about this message felt off. Why would an emergency alert come as a direct text from an unknown number? They usually come through the emergency broadcast system. And why specifically mention avoiding basements? The house is on a slight hill, and flooding has never been an issue here. I started getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I sat on the couch in the living room with my lamp, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. Around midnight, the storm was still raging. The wind howled around the house and rain pounded against the windows. I was getting tired, but felt too on edge to sleep. That's when I heard it. A distinct creak from the wooden stairs that lead to my office upstairs. My heart started racing immediately. Those stairs are old and have a very specific sound. Anyone who's lived in this house would recognize it. And I was definitely not walking on them at that moment. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen over the storm. There it was again, another creak, like someone trying to step lightly, but still putting weight on the old wood. My first thought was that maybe a window had blown open upstairs, and the wind was somehow making the floorboards creak. I needed to check, but I was terrified to go up there. I slowly got up from the couch, picked up my lamp, and moved toward the staircase. Before I reached it, I heard another sound, this time from behind me, from the direction of the kitchen. It sounded like the basement door opening. I spun around and saw that the basement door was wide open. I'm absolutely certain I had closed it when I came up earlier. I always close it because it blocks part of the hallway when it's open. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the lamp. I took a few steps toward the open door, thinking maybe the latch hadn't caught properly and the wind had pushed it open. But as I got closer, I heard heavy footsteps coming up the basement stairs, fast, determined footsteps. I dropped the lamp and ran to the door, slamming my body against it just as someone on the other side pushed hard. The impact knocked me back, but I recovered and threw myself against the door again, this time holding it shut with all my weight. "Who's there?" I screamed, my voice cracking with fear. "I've called the police. They're on their way." I was lying. My phone was still in the living room where I'd left it on the couch. The person on the other side didn't answer. Instead, they rammed into the door so hard it felt like it might splinter. I braced my feet against the floor and pushed back with everything I had. My arms were trembling from the effort. Then they started kicking the door. Hard, deliberate kicks near the handle, like they were trying to break the lock. The wood started to crack, and I knew I couldn't hold it much longer. I looked around desperately for something to block the door with. There was a small side table in the hallway. While keeping my body pressed against the door, I reached out and dragged it over, wedging it under the doorknob. It wouldn't hold for long, but maybe long enough for me to get my phone. I made a break for the living room, grabbing my phone from the couch. I could hear the intruder still kicking at the door, the wood splintering more with each impact. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. As soon as I pressed call, the kicking stopped. Complete silence except for the storm outside. I whispered into the phone, telling the operator someone was breaking into my house. I gave them my address and described what was happening. The operator told me to get out if I could do so safely. I crept to the front door, unlocked it as quietly as possible, and ran to my car in the pouring rain. I was drenched within seconds. I jumped in, locked the doors, and backed out of the driveway so fast I nearly hit the mailbox. I drove to the end of the street and parked where I could see my house, waiting for the police. When they arrived about 10 minutes later, I watched them enter my house with flashlights and weapons drawn. After what felt like forever, an officer came to my car and told me they'd found no one inside, but the back door was open. They must have fled when they heard me calling the police. The officer took me back inside to check if anything was stolen, but nothing was missing. The basement door was badly damaged from being kicked, and there were muddy footprints on the basement stairs and floor. The most disturbing part came when the police asked about the text I'd received. They confirmed it wasn't from any emergency service. The power company also verified that only my house had lost power. Someone had manually shut it off at the breaker box from outside. The box had been forced open and the main switch turned off. This means someone targeted me specifically. They knew my phone number to send that fake alert. They cut my power deliberately. They wanted me to go to the basement. They were waiting for me. The police increased patrols in my neighborhood for a few weeks, but they never found who did it. No fingerprints, no clear footprints outside, nothing on nearby security cameras because of the heavy rain. I've installed security cameras, motion lights, and new locks on all doors and windows. I'm looking for a new place to live. I still have no idea why someone would target me like this. Was it random? Did they mistake me for someone else? Or does someone in this town have a reason to want to harm me that I don't know about? I keep replaying that night in my head, wondering what would have happened if I hadn't been able to hold that door shut. I still don't know who was on the other side or what they wanted from me. Story 12. I don't usually share personal stuff online, but I need to get this off my chest. What happened to me 3 months ago during a food delivery has completely messed with my head, and I still get cold sweats thinking about it. I've been working as a food delivery driver for about 1.5 years now, mostly evenings after my regular job. Nothing fancy, just trying to make some extra cash to help pay down my student loans faster. Most nights are completely boring and predictable. You pick up food, drop it off, get a few bucks, rinse and repeat. That Thursday night started like any other. I'd already done about 8 deliveries since getting off my day job at 6, making decent tips. It was getting close to 11, and I was thinking about calling it a night since orders were slowing down. I figured I'd wait for one more decent order before heading home. Just as I was about to log off the app, I got a ping for a $20 delivery. $20 for what looked like a 15-minute drive? Hell yes. I accepted it immediately without even checking the destination too carefully. The restaurant was this Thai place I'd picked up from dozens of times, so I knew the routine. In and out in 5 minutes. After grabbing the food, I plugged the address into my GPS and started driving. I wasn't super familiar with the area it was taking me to, but that's not unusual. After about 10 minutes, I realized we were heading into a much more rural part of town than I expected. The houses became fewer and farther between, and eventually I was just driving down this dark, empty road with dense forest on both sides. The GPS had me make a few turns onto increasingly narrow roads. I remember thinking it was weird that someone would order delivery out here, but people do live in remote areas, and $20 is $20. Eventually, I ended up on this gravel road that cut straight into the woods. My headlights were the only light around besides the moon, and the gravel was crunching under my tires so loudly it made me jumpy. After about half a mile on this gravel road, I passed through an open gate. There was a small sign, but it was too dark to read it clearly. The road opened up to what looked like a small parking area, and my GPS announced I'd arrived at my destination. I looked around, confused. There were no houses, no cabins, nothing. Just an empty gravel lot surrounded by trees. That's when I realized where I was. The Vista Escura Forest Preserve. I'd hiked there a couple times before, but during the day. It should have been closed at this hour. I sat in my car, engine still running, trying to figure out what to do. Had I entered the wrong address? Was the customer at a different entrance? My phone rang, making me jump. It was the customer's number. "Hello?" I answered. The voice on the other end was, off, really deep and thick, like someone forcing their voice to sound lower than it naturally was. It was hard to understand them. "You're here? I'm camping with some friends. Just follow the trail. You'll see our campfire. We're about a quarter mile in." I hesitated. "The preserve is open for camping this late?" Yeah, we got permission," the voice said quickly. "Just follow the main trail. You'll see our fire." Before I could ask anything else, they hung up. I sat there for a minute, debating what to do. This felt weird. Since when did this preserve allow overnight camping? And who orders food delivery to a campsite? But I'd already driven all this way, and I had the food. Plus, $20 is $20, right? Stupid decision. I grabbed the food bag, locked my car, and turned on my phone flashlight. The main trail was obvious enough, a wide dirt path leading into the trees. As I walked, the silence started to get to me. If there was a group camping nearby, shouldn't I hear talking, laughter, music, something? But there was nothing except the sound of my own footsteps and breathing. The trail curved slightly, and after walking for about 5 minutes, I spotted a reddish glow through the trees up ahead. Relief washed over me, so there were actually people camping after all. But as I got closer, something felt increasingly wrong. I could see the campfire clearly now, but there was nothing else. No tents, no chairs, no coolers, just a fire burning in a hastily made fire pit. And no people. My heart started beating faster. I stopped walking and shined my flashlight around the area. That's when I sensed it more than saw it. Movement in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Someone was there, deliberately staying out of sight, watching me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "I've got your Thai food order." No response. My instincts were screaming at me to leave. I could feel sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool night air. "I'm just going to leave the food here, okay?" I called out, already backing up. That's when he stepped into the firelight. A tall man wearing dark clothes, with dark hair hanging partially over his face. What struck me immediately was his smile. This wide, forced grin that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like someone trying to appear friendly, but not quite knowing how. "Sorry about that," he said in that same unnatural deep voice from the phone. "I was just taking a leak." I glanced around. There was clearly no camping equipment, no friends, just this one guy, a fire, and the darkness. "Where's your camping gear?" I asked, still backing up. "Where are your friends?" "They're coming later," he said, taking a step toward me. "They sent me ahead to set up." Another step toward me. That's when I noticed he was wearing what looked like latex gloves. In the firelight, they had this sickly shine to them. "I've got your money right here," he said, reaching into his pocket, still coming closer. I didn't wait to see what he'd pull out. I turned and ran. "Hey!" he shouted after me. "Wait! I just want to pay you!" I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could down that dark trail, my phone flashlight bouncing wildly, barely lighting my way. I tripped once on a root, scraping my hands as I caught myself, but I was up again in an instant. Behind me, I could hear him calling, his voice dropping the fake deepness now. "Come back! I just want to talk to you." Then footsteps. He was following me. I ran even harder, my lungs burning. The parking area came into view, and I sprinted for my car, fumbling with my keys. I got the door open and jumped inside, locking it immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. That's when I noticed it. The gate at the entrance was closed now. It had been open when I drove in, but now it was definitely closed. My stomach dropped. I'd have to get out and open it to leave. I started the car and turned on the high beams, frantically looking around the parking area. No sign of him yet, but I could hear rustling from the trail. He was getting closer. Screw the gate. I wasn't getting out of my car. I threw the car into drive and floored it toward the gate. It wasn't a solid gate, just two metal poles with a chain between them. I aimed for the side, hoping there was enough space between the pole and the trees to squeeze through. As my headlights swept across the trees, I caught a glimpse of him emerging from the trail, still wearing that horrible fake smile. My car bounced violently as I went partially off the gravel and onto the rough ground beside the gate. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to hit a tree or get stuck in a ditch, but somehow I made it through, scraping the side of my car against something in the process. I didn't slow down on the gravel road. I kept going as fast as I dared, constantly checking my rearview mirror. No headlights appeared behind me. After what felt like forever, I reached the main road and finally felt like I could breathe again. I drove straight home, checking my mirror the entire way. I was so rattled I forgot to even report what happened to the delivery app until the next morning. The next day, I called the parks department, trying to sound casual. The woman I spoke to confirmed what I already suspected. The Vista Escura Preserve closes at 8 p.m. every night, and camping is absolutely not allowed, let alone campfires. I filed a police report, but without more to go on than creepy guy in the woods, they didn't seem too concerned. They said they'd have a patrol car check the area, but I never heard anything back. I've quit doing deliveries at night. Not worth it. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, thinking about what might have happened if I'd stepped closer to hand him the food, directly. What was in his pocket? Why the gloves? Who closes a gate behind someone like that? And the question that keeps me up most nights, what would have happened if my car hadn't made it past that gate? Story 13. I still can't believe it's been 3 weeks since that night, and I'm still jumping at every shadow and sleeping with the lights on. I know how this is going to sound, but I swear on everything I care about that what I'm about to share is exactly what happened to us that night at the abandoned hacienda. It started as just another boring Saturday. Me, Alex, and Mike had been talking about exploring this old abandoned hacienda out in the prairie for months. It's about 40 minutes outside our town, and there are all these local legends about shadow people and weird noises coming from there at night. We'd seen some pictures online of the place covered in graffiti, pentagrams, weird symbols, all that creepy stuff. Honestly, we never really believed any of the stories, but we thought it would be a cool place to check out and maybe take some pictures for Instagram. We agreed to meet at the entrance to the prairie at 7 in the evening. It wasn't fully dark yet, but the sun was definitely on its way down. I remember pulling up in my car and seeing Alex already there, leaning against his truck, scrolling through his phone. Mike showed up a few minutes later. We all had our backpacks with flashlights, water, and snacks. Mike even brought his expensive camera to document the paranormal, as he joked. "Ready to meet some ghosts?" Alex laughed, doing this stupid wiggling fingers thing like he was trying to scare us. "Dude, the only scary thing we're gonna find is probably some homeless guy who'll be more scared of us than we are of him," I replied. That's honestly what I thought at the time. We started walking along this dirt path that cuts through the prairie. The hacienda was supposed to be about 1.5 miles in. The prairie grass was tall, almost up to our waists in some spots, and it made this constant rustling sound in the breeze. It was still warm out, and there were bugs everywhere. I kept swatting mosquitoes off my arms and neck. As we walked, Mike kept going on about all the stories he'd heard about the place. Apparently, the hacienda had been abandoned in the 1970s, after the owner died in some mysterious way. Local kids claimed they'd seen shadow figures standing in the windows, watching them as they passed by. Some people said they heard screams coming from inside, even though the place was completely empty. My cousin's friend came out here with some guys last summer, and he swears they heard someone whispering their names from inside the walls, Mike said. Yeah, and I'm sure they weren't high or anything, Alex snorted. I laughed too, but I remember feeling this weird tension building in my stomach. The sun was setting faster than I expected, and the prairie looked different in the fading light, less open and more like this endless sea of grass that could hide anything. It took us about 40 minutes to reach the hacienda. By then, it was getting pretty dark, and we had to use our flashlights. The building was bigger than I expected, a sprawling single-story structure with crumbling stucco walls and a partially collapsed roof. It must have been beautiful once, but now it was just this decaying shell covered in graffiti. And not just regular tags, there were these elaborate symbols painted all over the exterior walls. Pentagrams, weird stick figures, Latin phrases, and these unsettling eye symbols that seemed to follow you as you moved. Okay, that's actually creepier than I thought it would be, I admitted, shining my flashlight across the front of the building. Some of these symbols look fresh, Alex noted, touching one of the walls. Like, this paint isn't that old. That should have been our first warning sign, but we were still in that cocky, nothing can happen to us mindset. So, naturally, we decided to go inside. The front door was gone, just this gaping entrance into darkness. The moment we stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop about 10 degrees. I'm not exaggerating. It was noticeably colder inside. The air felt heavy and stale, like nobody had breathed it in years. Our flashlights revealed a large entrance hall with doorways leading off in different directions. The floor was concrete, covered in dust, broken glass, and more of those weird symbols painted directly onto the ground. There was this overwhelming smell of dampness and something else I couldn't identify, kind of metallic and unpleasant. Let's split up, Mike suggested, and I immediately shot that down. Hell no. Have you never seen a horror movie? We're staying together, I insisted. We moved through the rooms slowly. Most were empty, except for debris and occasional pieces of broken furniture. In what must have been the living room, someone had arranged rocks in a circle with candles at various points. The wax had dripped down and hardened, showing they'd been lit relatively recently. Looks like the local teens have their party spot, Alex said, but his voice was tight. None of us were joking much anymore. As we moved deeper into the hacienda, I started feeling like we were being watched. It's hard to explain, but it was this intense pressure on the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing on my skin. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there. We'd been exploring for maybe 20 minutes when we came to what must have been the master bedroom. Unlike the other rooms, this one had a metal bed frame still intact in the center. Someone had spray painted a massive symbol on the wall behind it, a circle with lines radiating outward and these weird characters I'd never seen before. Mike was taking pictures when suddenly all three of our flashlights started flickering simultaneously. What the hell? I muttered, shaking mine. Probably just cheap batteries, Alex said, but he didn't sound convinced. That's when we heard it, a scraping sound from somewhere deeper in the hacienda, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. We all froze, looking at each other. Hello? Mike called out, which I thought was the stupidest thing he could possibly do. No answer, just another scraping sound, closer this time. Probably just an animal, I said, but my mouth had gone completely dry. "Let's go check the back rooms and then head out," Alex suggested. "It's getting late anyway." We moved toward the sound, which in retrospect was our second major mistake of the night. The hallway led to what must have been the kitchen area. The windows here were broken, letting in the faint moonlight. As we entered, our flashlight swept across the room, and that's when Mike grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. "Look," he whispered, pointing toward the window. About 200 meters away, out in the prairie, was a figure, just standing there, perfectly still. In the darkness, I couldn't make out details, just this human-shaped silhouette standing motionless, facing the hacienda, facing us. "Is that a person?" Alex whispered. "I don't know," I replied. "Maybe it's just a post or something." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It was too proportional, too human-like. We stood there watching for maybe 30 seconds, and then the figure moved. Not like a normal person would move. It was there 1 second, and then it was closer the next, like it had covered 50 meters in an instant without actually appearing to run. "What the fuck?" Mike hissed. "Did you see that?" My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "We need to leave, now." We backed out of the kitchen and turned to head toward the front entrance. That's when Alex, who was slightly ahead of us, suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His flashlight beam was fixed on the entrance hall. "Guys," he said, his voice barely audible, "run." I moved up beside him and felt my entire body go cold. Standing in the entrance hall, blocking our exit, was another figure. This one was inside, and it was tall, way taller than any of us, probably over 6'3". It was just standing there, completely still, its form darker than the darkness around it. I couldn't make out a face or features, just this impossibly tall humanoid shape. The most terrifying thing was how silent it had been. We'd never heard it enter, never heard it approach. It was just there, as if it had materialized from the shadows themselves. For what felt like an eternity, nobody moved. Then Alex screamed, "Run!" And we all turned and bolted toward the back of the hacienda. We crashed through a door I hadn't noticed before, finding ourselves in what must have been a sunroom with large broken windows. Without hesitating, we scrambled through one of the window frames, cutting ourselves on the remaining shards of glass, and sprinted into the prairie. I've never run so fast in my life. The tall grass whipped against my legs as I pumped my arms, gasping for breath. I could hear Mike and Alex crashing through the grass nearby. Mike was struggling. He's a bigger guy and not in great shape. I grabbed his arm, trying to help pull him along. "Don't look back," Alex was shouting. "Just run." But of course I looked back. I couldn't help it. The figure, that impossibly tall, dark figure, was standing outside the hacienda now, just watching us. And then, like the one in the field, it moved in that unnatural way, covering ground without appearing to run. We changed direction, heading toward the small lakes that we knew were somewhere to our right. The idea was to reach the housing area beyond them, where there would be people and lights. My lungs were burning, and Mike was wheezing beside me. Alex was a bit ahead, constantly looking back and screaming for us to hurry. I risked another glance back and nearly fell over. The figure was much closer now, maybe 100 meters behind us. We reached the first of the small lakes, rushing along its shore. There's a small dam between the lakes, and as we approached it, I looked back again. The figure was standing by the lake's edge. In the moonlight reflecting off the water, I could see it more clearly now, and I wished to God I couldn't. It was changing. What had been a tall, humanoid shape was contorting, its limbs elongating, its body dropping forward until it was on all fours. It no longer looked human at all. It started moving again, but now it was running on 4 limbs. impossibly fast, each movement jerky and wrong, like watching a spider move in fast forward. We scrambled across the dam and kept running toward the lights of the housing area we could now see in the distance. Mike was crying beside me, repeating, oh God," over and over. I was crying too, tears streaming down my face as I ran, expecting at any moment to feel something grab me from behind. When we finally reached the edge of the housing area, we were all screaming and sobbing. A security guard from the community gate came running toward us, clearly alarmed. "What happened? Are you kids okay?" he kept asking. We couldn't even form coherent sentences. We just pointed back toward the prairie, gasping about something chasing us. The guard radioed for backup and took us to the security office. We eventually calmed down enough to tell him we'd been spooked by someone at the abandoned hacienda. I don't think he believed our full story. How could he? But he could see we were genuinely terrified. He called our parents to come pick us up. It's been 3 weeks now, and none of us have been the same. We've tried to rationalize what we saw. Maybe it was just some psycho living out there who likes scaring people. Maybe we worked ourselves up and imagined the worst. But I know what I saw, and so do Alex and Mike. We've all been experiencing the same thing since that night, this constant feeling of being watched. I'll be sitting in my room, and suddenly I'll get that same pressure on the back of my neck, that certainty that something is standing right behind me. Mike says he keeps seeing a tall shadow in his peripheral vision that vanishes when he turns to look at it. Alex has been sleeping on his parents' bedroom floor because he's too scared to be alone. Whatever was at that hacienda, I don't think it stayed there. I think it followed us home. I think it's still watching us, waiting for something. I don't know what to do. I can't tell my parents. They'd never believe me. I can't sleep. Every noise makes me jump. Every shadow seems to move. I just needed to write this down, to tell someone who might understand or have experienced something similar. Because I know what we encountered wasn't human, and I don't think it's done with us yet. Story 14. I never thought I'd share this story with anyone outside my closest friends, but it's been weighing on me for years. Even now, over a decade later, I still check my windows at night and feel uneasy when I hear unexpected noises outside my house. It all started in 6th grade when our middle school was preparing for the annual Halloween haunted house. I was 11 years old and excited to be on the decorations committee. Our teacher, Ms. Reynolds, paired us up to work on different sections, and I got matched with a boy named Chris. He seemed normal at first, quiet but friendly enough. We spent about 2 weeks cutting out paper bats, hanging fake cobwebs, and painting cardboard tombstones. Nothing about our interactions gave me any reason to feel uncomfortable. We just talked about normal kid stuff, what teachers we liked, what movies were scary, that kind of thing. The haunted house went great. Tons of kids from the elementary school came through, and our section, the graveyard, got lots of compliments. After Halloween, things went back to normal. Chris and I would say hi in the hallway, but that was about it. We weren't in many classes together, and I didn't think much about him. About 2 weeks after Halloween, I was doing homework when my computer dinged with a message notification. It was from Chris, which seemed weird since we'd never messaged before. I opened it, expecting maybe a question about homework or something school-related. What I got instead made my stomach drop. It was this long, rambling paragraph about how he was in love with me. He wrote that I'd been driving him crazy since the start of the year, that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that my smile lit up his soul. Yes, an 11-year-old wrote that, and that he needed me to notice him. The message ended with, Please respond. I need to know if you feel the same way. I remember sitting there, feeling really confused and uncomfortable. I'd never had a boy like me before, at least not that I knew of, and I didn't like Chris that way. I didn't want to be mean, so I wrote back something like, "I'm sorry, but I only see you as a friend from school. I'm not interested in having a boyfriend right now." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I got to school and immediately noticed something was off. People were looking at me weird, whispering to each other. My friend Leah pulled me aside before first period and said, "Did you hear what Chris is saying about you?" Apparently, Chris had told practically the entire 6th grade that he was going to kiss me that day, even if it means cornering her. Those were his exact words. He was telling everyone he wouldn't take no for an answer. I felt sick. I went straight to my homeroom teacher and told her what was happening. She seemed concerned and walked me to the principal's office. I explained everything, the message, what Chris was telling everyone. The principal, Mr. Daniels, called Chris in, and I had to sit there while Chris denied saying anything about cornering me. Mr. Daniels told Chris to stay away from me and told me I should stay inside during breaks for the next few days until things calmed down. I lived directly across from the school, which had always seemed convenient before. Now it felt terrifying. What if Chris followed me home? That afternoon, my mom picked me up even though we literally lived across the street. When we got home, there was a folded piece of paper stuck in our door. My mom opened it and immediately looked worried. She wouldn't let me read it, but later I found out it said, "Maya, look under your brother's Cadillac." My brother was in college, but he'd left his old car at our house. My dad went to check under it and said there was nothing there. The weird thing was, when my brother came home for Thanksgiving break a few weeks later and tried to start the car, it wouldn't work. Something had been damaged underneath. The next day at school was awful. Chris's friends, boys I'd barely spoken to before, kept coming up to me saying I should give him a chance and that I was being too harsh. One of them even said, "He just wants one kiss. What's the big deal?" I tried to avoid everyone, but during lunch, I noticed Chris taking pictures of me with his phone. Later that day, I got another message from him saying I looked so beautiful when I was eating my apple at lunch. He started sending messages every day, commenting on what I was wearing or how my hair looked or how pretty I was going to be when I got older. I went to the school counselor, Ms. Peterson, hoping she would help. Instead, she told me I should be flattered that a boy was paying so much attention to me. "Boys will be boys," she said with a smile. "He probably just doesn't know how to express his feelings properly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was scared, not flattered. I tried telling my parents, but they were dealing with my grandmother's cancer diagnosis, and while they were concerned, they thought the school was handling it. They told me to keep reporting things to the principal and stay with friends between classes. Things reached a breaking point one Saturday in November. My parents had gone shopping at the mall about 20 minutes away, and I was alone in the house. I was in my bedroom on the 2nd floor, trying to distract myself with homework, when I heard something hit my window. At first, I thought it was just a bird or maybe the wind blowing something. Then it happened again and again. I peeked through the curtains and nearly screamed. Chris was standing in our front yard, picking up small rocks and throwing them at my window. When he saw me looking, he waved and smiled like this was completely normal behavior. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I ran to grab my phone and had just picked it up when it buzzed with a message from Chris. "I saw you. Why won't you come down and talk to me? I just want to talk." I didn't respond. Another message came through. "Please, Maya, just come outside. Just for a minute. I just want one kiss." I was shaking so badly I could barely dial my mom's number. The call went to voicemail. I tried my dad. Voicemail. I tried 3 more times before finally getting through to my mom, who said they were checking out and would be home in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Chris kept throwing rocks at my window and sending messages that got increasingly angry. "Why are you ignoring me? I know you're home alone. Do you think you're too good for me? I just want what's fair." I sat on the floor of my closet with the door closed, trying not to make any noise. I kept thinking about how he knew I was home alone. Had he been watching our house? How long had he been doing that? When I finally heard my parents' car pull into the driveway, I ran downstairs. Chris was gone, but he'd left a note taped to our door. All it said was, "Tomorrow." My dad immediately called the police, who came and took a report. They also called Chris's parents. I don't know exactly what happened after that, but Chris wasn't at school for a week. When he came back, he was told to stay away from me. I blocked him on all social media and messaging apps, but school was still a nightmare. We had assigned seats in most classes, so I couldn't avoid being near him completely. I'd catch him staring at me during class or in the cafeteria. Sometimes I'd notice him following a little too closely in the hallway. The worst part was that I still had to see him for years afterward, all through middle school and high school. He never directly approached me again, but I always felt his eyes on me. Some teachers knew about the situation and would make sure we weren't paired up for projects, but others had no idea and would sometimes group us together. I'd have to ask to switch partners, which made me look difficult. About 4 years after the incident, during sophomore year of high school, Chris suddenly disappeared from school. Rumors went around that he'd been arrested, but nobody knew for sure what happened. I didn't ask questions. I was just relieved not to see him anymore. The whole experience left me with this constant feeling of being watched. I still struggle with anxiety, especially when I'm alone at home. What makes me angriest, looking back, isn't just what Chris did. It's how the adults who were supposed to protect me failed so completely. That counselor who told me to be flattered by behavior that was clearly predatory. The principal who thought keeping me inside during breaks was a solution, instead of addressing Chris's threatening behavior. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if my parents hadn't come home when they did that Saturday, or if Chris hadn't been caught. Would things have escalated further? What was he planning to do? I've tried to put it behind me, but certain things still trigger those memories. A car slowing down when I'm walking alone, a notification from an unknown number, the sound of something hitting my window at night. The scariest part is knowing that someone I barely knew developed this intense, obsessive fixation on me for no reason I could understand. It made me question every interaction, every friendship, wondering if there was something sinister lurking beneath the surface. To this day, I can't understand how an 11-year-old boy became so fixated and threatening. What was going on in his home life? What made him think this behavior was acceptable? I'll never know, and honestly, I don't want to. I just want to forget it ever happened, but some traumas never fully heal. Story 15. I've always been a runner, not competitively or anything, just for my own sanity. There's something about the rhythm of your feet hitting the ground and the way your breath syncs up with your stride that just clears your head like nothing else. I moved to Tidecrest about 3 years ago for work. It's one of those small coastal towns that swells with tourists during summer and then practically becomes a ghost town from October through April. That seasonal emptiness is actually what I grew to love most about living here. During tourist season, I'd do my runs early in the morning before the crowds descended. But once the weather turned and the last of the summer people packed up, I discovered something even better: nighttime runs along the abandoned boardwalk. God, I loved that boardwalk. It stretches for almost 4 miles along the shoreline, this weathered wooden path that's seen decades of footsteps. During summer, it's packed with ice cream shops, trinket stores, and sunburned families. But in the off-season, it's just me, the sound of the waves, and the hollow echo of my sneakers slapping against those wooden planks. I started doing these runs about 6 months ago, usually around 9 or 10 at night when the darkness had fully settled in. There's just enough lighting from the occasional lamppost to see where you're going, but it's dim enough to make out the stars and sometimes even the Milky Way when the sky is clear. This happened 2 nights ago. I still haven't really slept since then. It was a Thursday night, unusually cold for October, with this crisp bite to the air that made my lungs feel clean and sharp with each breath. I parked in my usual spot near the old Carousel building. It's been closed for renovations all year, and did my usual stretches while listening to my running playlist. Nothing unusual, nothing different. Just another night run to clear my head after a stressful day at work. I set off down the boardwalk heading north, away from town. The tide was high that night, and the waves were crashing pretty hard against the shore. I remember thinking how the ocean seemed angrier than usual, but in that beautiful way that makes you feel small and insignificant in the best possible way. About a mile in, I got that feeling. You know the one, when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no apparent reason, like someone just walked over your grave, as my grandmother used to say. I glanced back over my shoulder, not breaking stride, and that's when I saw the figure. It was just standing there, maybe a quarter mile behind me, perfectly still in the middle of the boardwalk. Even from that distance, I could tell it was facing my direction, just watching. I turned back around, picking up my pace slightly. It was probably just another night owl out for a walk, I told myself. The boardwalk is public property after all, but something felt off about the stillness of whoever it was. People don't just stand motionless like that, especially not in the cold. Another few minutes passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I looked back again. The figure was closer now, much closer, maybe 100 yards behind me. But here's the thing that made my stomach drop. It was still in that same rigid, unmoving posture, like it hadn't walked to get closer, but had somehow just appeared nearer to me. I could make out more details now. It was wearing dark clothing and had a hood pulled up, obscuring any features I might have been able to see. The proportions seemed human enough, but something about the way it held itself was just wrong. Too still, too straight. My pace quickened without me even consciously deciding to speed up. I pulled out one of my earbuds so I could hear better. The rush of the waves, the creak of the boardwalk under my feet, my own increasingly labored breathing, and then, faintly, what sounded like footsteps syncing perfectly with my own. I jerked my head around again, heart hammering in my chest. The figure was now maybe 50 yards back, still motionless, still facing me, still hooded, but undeniably closer. That's when the first real jolt of fear hit me, because it wasn't possible. I would have heard someone running to catch up. I would have seen movement in my peripheral vision. There was nowhere to hide on the straight stretch of boardwalk. No way someone could have covered that distance without me noticing. unless they had moved while I was looking forward. But each time I checked, they were completely still. I yanked out my other earbud and shoved my phone in my pocket. My hands were already starting to shake. I broke into a faster run, no longer caring about pace or form. Now I was just putting distance between myself and whatever that was. 30 seconds later, I looked back again, 20 yards away now, completely motionless. Hood still up, no visible face within its shadow. I couldn't catch my breath. It felt like someone had wrapped a belt around my chest and was pulling it tighter with each stride. The boardwalk that had always been my sanctuary now felt like a trap. A straight line with nowhere to hide, nowhere to duck away, nowhere to escape except forward. I started sprinting, full out, lungs burning, muscles screaming, sprinting like I haven't done since high school track. The slap of my shoes against the boards became a frantic drumbeat. I was gasping for air, but I didn't slow down. I don't know what compelled me to look back again. I wish I hadn't. 10 yards, motionless, watching. At this point, I was sobbing while I ran, actual tears streaming down my face, mixing with the sweat and the cold night air. My car was still at least a mile away. I couldn't maintain this pace that long, but I also couldn't slow down. Not with that thing getting closer every time I looked back. The next time I checked, it was maybe 5 yards behind me. Close enough that I should have been able to hear breathing, to see the rise and fall of a chest, to make out a face within that hood. But there was nothing. Just this unnatural stillness, even as it somehow kept pace with me. I don't remember much about the rest of that run. It's a blur of terror and exhaustion. I know I was making these awful whimpering noises with each exhale. I know my legs were on fire and my lungs felt like they were going to explode. I know I kept looking back and it kept being closer without ever seeming to move. When I finally saw the silhouette of the carousel building, I nearly collapsed with relief. My car was just beyond it. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys, clutching them in my hand so hard that they left indentations in my palm that were still visible the next morning. I reached my car and my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the keys. I fell to my knees, scrabbling for them on the ground, certain that any second I would feel a hand on my shoulder or a presence looming over me. I found the keys, stood up, and unlocked the car with trembling fingers. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, hitting the lock button so hard, I'm surprised it didn't break. I jammed the key into the ignition, started the engine, and that's when I looked up. It was standing directly in front of my car, right where I had been parked, like it had been waiting for me all along. I still couldn't see a face within that hood, just darkness where features should be. It didn't move, it didn't approach the car. It just stood there, facing me, impossibly still. I threw the car into reverse, cranked the wheel hard, and hit the gas. The tires squealed as I spun around, not even checking if there was traffic coming. I shifted into drive and floored it, not daring to look in my rearview mirror until I was at least a mile away from the boardwalk. When I finally did check, the road behind me was empty. The drive home is usually about 15 minutes. I made it in 7. I ran every red light, blew through every stop sign. When I got to my apartment, I double-checked the back seat before getting out of the car, something I've never felt the need to do before. I ran from my car to my front door, unlocked it with shaking hands, got inside, and immediately locked and chained it behind me. Then I went through my entire apartment, checking closets, under the bed, behind the shower curtain, anywhere something could hide. I closed all the blinds and curtains. I wedged a chair under my doorknob. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. I sat on my couch with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and sound from the building settling. At some point, I realized I was still in my running clothes, soaked with sweat that had long since gone cold. Yesterday, I called in sick to work. I couldn't bring myself to leave my apartment. Last night, I finally passed out from exhaustion around 3 in the morning, only to jerk awake an hour later from a nightmare where I was running down an endless boardwalk while something gained on me from behind. I still don't know what I encountered out there. I've spent hours online trying to find something, anything, that matches what I experienced. The closest I can come up with are stories of shadow people or some kind of supernatural entity, but I've never believed in that stuff. What I do know is that I'm never running at night again. I'm never going back to that boardwalk during the off-season. Hell, I'm seriously considering moving away from Tidecrest altogether, because the worst part isn't what happened. The worst part is that I have this terrible gnawing feeling that it isn't over, that whatever was out there found me once and can find me again, that maybe it followed me home. Last night, just before dawn, I thought I saw something outside my bedroom window, a dark shape, perfectly still, looking up at my second-floor apartment. I yanked the curtains closed and huddled under my blankets like a child. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to tell. Who would believe me? How do I explain being chased by something that never seemed to move? All I know is that when darkness falls tonight, I'll be sitting here with every light on, jumping at shadows, and wondering if that thing is out there right now, standing, waiting, watching, and somehow getting closer without ever moving at all. Story 16. I still can't believe what happened that night at Pinewood Campground last summer. It's been almost a year, and I've told this story to exactly 3 people, all of whom think I'm either exaggerating or flat out making it up. I'm not. I wish I was. My girlfriend Jess and I had been planning this camping trip for months. We'd both been working insane hours, me at the accounting firm, her finishing up her nursing clinicals, and we desperately needed to disconnect. We invited our usual group, Mike and his girlfriend Alyssa, my college roommate Derek, and Jess's cousin Taylor with her husband Chris. 7 of us total, all late 20s, all ready to escape civilization for a weekend. Pinewood isn't exactly backcountry wilderness. It's one of those designated campgrounds with numbered sites, fire pits, and communal bathrooms about a quarter-mile walk from the sites. But it's set deep enough in the national forest that you can't hear roads, and the stars are incredible. We'd reserved 3 adjacent sites, numbers 47 through 49, for Friday and Saturday nights. Everything started out perfectly. We arrived Friday afternoon, set up our tents, and spent the evening grilling burgers and playing cards. The campground was maybe half full, mostly families with kids and a few other groups our age. Nothing unusual. Saturday is when it all went to hell. The day itself was great. We hiked about 5 miles to a waterfall, swam in the freezing pool at the bottom, and made it back to camp around 4 in the afternoon. That's when we noticed them, the new arrivals at Site 51, just past our little cluster. 4 guys, probably around our age, unloading enough alcohol to stock a small bar. I'm not exaggerating. They had coolers full of beer and what looked like a dozen bottles of various liquors. "Looks like they're planning a good night," Derek said, and we all laughed. If only we'd known. We started our own drinking around 7 after dinner. Nothing crazy. Beers around the campfire, some whiskey passed around, the usual camping stuff. We could hear the guys at 51 getting progressively louder, but it wasn't a big deal yet. Campgrounds on Saturday nights tend to be a bit rowdy until quiet hours at 11. By 10:30, though, It was clear this group wasn't planning on observing quiet hours. They had music playing, not blasting but definitely audible, and they kept breaking into these random bursts of shouting laughter. Annoying, but still within the realm of typical campground behavior. Then the screaming started. I remember checking my watch. It was 11:15 exactly when I heard the first one. A blood-curdling primal scream that made all 7 of us freeze mid-conversation. It was the kind of scream you associate with someone being murdered. "What the actual fuck was that?" Chris said, standing up. Before anyone could answer, we heard laughter from Site 51. "Whoa, that's the stuff!" a voice yelled. We all relaxed a bit, realizing it wasn't an emergency, just some drunk idiot. "Jesus Christ, I thought someone was being attacked," Jess whispered. 10 minutes later, it happened again. The same horrific scream, followed by more laughter. Then again about 15 minutes after that. Mike walked over to their site after the third scream. He came back shaking his head. "They're doing shots," he explained. "And apparently this one dude screams after every shot he takes. They think it's hilarious." "Did you ask them to stop?" Alyssa asked. "Yeah, but they're wasted. The screamer guy could barely focus his eyes on me. His friends said they'd try to get him to quiet down. They didn't." The screams continued, about every 15 to 20 minutes, each one making me jump despite knowing what was coming. Parents from nearby sites started emerging from their tents, looking around in confusion and annoyance. A few went over to complain directly. By 1 in the morning, the pattern was established. The guy would scream, people would shout at them to shut up, they'd quiet down for a bit, then the cycle would repeat. I couldn't sleep. None of us could. We'd retreated to our tents around midnight, but we were all just lying there, tensing up in anticipation of the next scream. The worst part was how the screams were changing. They started as these performative whoa kind of yells, but as the guy got more drunk, they transformed into something more disturbing. By 1:30, they sounded genuinely anguished, like the cries of someone in serious psychological distress. At 1:45, I remember checking my phone, I heard vehicle tires on gravel. Through the thin fabric of our tent, I could see headlights sweeping across the campground. The ranger had finally arrived. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the music stopped abruptly. There was some muffled talking, a few laughs, then silence. After about 10 minutes, the ranger's truck pulled away. "Thank God," Jess whispered next to me. "Maybe now we can get some sleep." We laid there in blessed silence for about 15 minutes. I was just starting to drift off when I heard car keys jingling and muffled voices from Site 51. "Dude, you're way too drunk," someone said loud enough for me to hear. "I'm fine," another voice slurred back. "Just gonna get more ice." "The store's closed, man. It's like 2 in the morning." "Then cigarettes, whatever. I need to drive." There was more arguing, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard a car door slam. I unzipped our tent just enough to peek out. I could see headlights flicker on at Site 51. The car, an older Honda Civic, backed up jerkily, then stopped. The driver's side door opened, and someone stumbled out, bent over, and vomited on the ground. One of his friends approached, saying something I couldn't hear. The driver waved him off, got back in the car, and slammed the door. The engine revved way too high. "Oh shit," I said to Jess. "This idiot is about to drive drunk." I was debating whether to intervene when the car lurched forward, tires spinning on gravel. It fishtailed onto the narrow campground road and accelerated away, moving way too fast for the winding path. The campground had fallen completely silent. I think everyone was awake now, listening to the receding sound of the car. I heard a few tent zippers, people emerging to see what was happening. I pulled on my shoes and stepped outside. Derek and Mike were already out, standing by the remains of our campfire. "Was that the screaming guy?" Derek asked. "I think so," I said. "He's completely wasted. Should we call someone?" Mike looked worried. "He's going to kill himself or someone else." I was about to suggest calling the ranger's office when we heard it. The sound I'll never forget as long as I live. First, there was a screeching of tires, followed by a metallic crashing noise. Then, after maybe 2 seconds of silence, there was this blinding blue-white flash that lit up the entire forest like daylight. It was so bright it left spots in my vision. The flash was followed immediately by an enormous boom that I felt in my chest more than heard. The ground actually trembled beneath my feet. Then darkness again, deeper than before, and silence. All the lights in the bathrooms and the few lampposts in the campground had gone out. The entire place was pitch black except for our dying embers and the stars above. "Holy shit," someone whispered behind me. I turned to see Chris and Taylor had emerged from their tent. "What was that?" Jess asked, her voice small and frightened as she joined us. "I think," Mike hesitated, "I think he hit the power substation." The campground sits about half a mile from a small electrical substation that serves this part of the forest. It's surrounded by a chain-link fence with warning signs set back from the main road into the campground. People were emerging from tents all around us now, murmuring in confusion and alarm. Someone had a powerful flashlight that they were sweeping across the woods in the direction of the explosion. "We should go see if he's okay," I said, though my feet felt rooted to the ground. Derek nodded, and we started walking down the campground road in the direction the car had gone. About 15 other campers joined us, a strange, silent procession in the dark. As we rounded the bend toward the entrance, we could see it. The fence around the substation was mangled, with a car-sized hole torn through it. Beyond, something was on fire. Not a huge blaze, but enough to cast an eerie orange glow. And there was the Honda, its front end crushed and partially wrapped around some kind of electrical equipment. What happened next is why I'm still struggling to process this whole thing. As we stood there, frozen in shock about 50 yards from the wreck, the car's interior light came on. Just clicked on normally, like someone had opened a door or pushed the button. And there he was, illuminated perfectly in the dome light. The driver, the screamer, sitting upright, staring straight ahead through the broken windshield. He was rail-thin with disheveled brown hair and a patchy beard. His face was blank, completely expressionless. Not injured, not panicked, just empty. He slowly turned his head toward us, the assembled onlookers. His movements were mechanical, almost inhuman. And his eyes, I swear they reflected the light in a way that human eyes don't. Like an animal's eyes in headlights, but more wrong somehow. No one moved, no one spoke. We all just stared at him, and he stared back. Then the interior light went out, just like that, not flickering or fading, just on 1 second, off the next. That broke the spell. People started shouting. A few ran forward toward the car. I followed, though something in me really didn't want to get closer. But when we reached the wreckage, the car was empty. The driver's side door was open, but there was no sign of the man. Some people started searching the area with flashlights, calling out. The 3 remaining guys from Site 51 pushed through the crowd, panicking about their friend. The Rangers arrived about 20 minutes later, followed by police, fire trucks, and eventually an ambulance. They searched for hours. They brought dogs. They checked the hospitals. Nothing. The official report said the driver fled the scene of the accident. His friends gave his name to the police, but I never found out what it was. The power company guys who came to assess the damage said it was a miracle he survived at all. The substation had discharged enough electricity to kill a dozen people. We packed up and left the next morning, cutting our trip short. None of us slept anyway. I've thought about that night hundreds of times since then. I've researched electrical accidents, drunk driving incidents, everything I could think of to make sense of what happened. But I keep coming back to what I saw, that expressionless face, those reflecting eyes, the way he just vanished. Sometimes I think about it like the universe hit a mute button. This guy had been making these horrible, inhuman sounds all night, disrupting everyone's peace, and then something just stopped him, silenced him permanently. I've never been back to Pinewood. I probably never will. I still go camping, but I find myself listening differently to the night sounds now, always half expecting to hear that scream again, always wondering where he went or what he became, or if he was ever really human at all. Story 17. I'm still shaking as I type this. Part of me doesn't even want to put this into words because it makes it all real again, but I need to get this out. Maybe someone here has been through something similar and can tell me how they moved past it. About 2 months ago, I matched with this guy Hunter on Bumble. His profile seemed normal enough. 26, decent job at some tech company, nice smile, liked hiking, and had a cute dog in his pictures. We chatted for a week before meeting up for coffee. He was good looking in person too, maybe a little intense with eye contact, but nothing that sent up immediate red flags. We ended up going on 4 dates over about 5 weeks. The first couple were actually pretty nice. We went to a local brewery, then hiking at a nearby trail the following weekend. By the 3rd date, though, something started feeling off. He kept asking questions about my schedule, where I worked, and seemed weirdly interested in my parents' house where I was staying temporarily to save money after college. I brushed it off initially. Maybe he was just awkward with conversation or really interested in my life. But then came our 4th date last Friday. We met at this Italian place downtown, and he was already half drunk when I arrived. I remember feeling instantly uncomfortable when he stood up to hug me and held on way too long. Throughout dinner, he kept touching my arm, my hand, my knee under the table. Every time I pulled away, he'd look hurt and make some comment about me being too uptight. After dinner, he suggested we go back to his place. I politely declined, saying I had an early morning. That's when his whole demeanor changed. His eyes got dark, and he kept pushing, saying things like, "Come on, I've spent all this money on you, and don't be such a tease." I stayed firm, made an excuse about needing to get home, and asked for the check. When we got outside, I told him I'd drive myself home. He kept insisting on following me to make sure I got home safely. I explicitly told him no, that I was fine, and said goodnight. I got in my car feeling really uneasy, but relieved to be leaving. About 5 minutes into my drive home, I noticed a black Honda Civic behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I made a right turn onto a side street that's not on the direct route home, just to be safe, and the car turned too. My heart started racing. I made another random turn. The car followed. With shaking hands, I pulled into a gas station, parked near the front entrance where there were people, and locked my doors. The Civic drove past slowly, and I could clearly see Hunter behind the wheel. He didn't stop. I sat there for maybe 15 minutes, trying to calm down. Then I texted him, "Were you just following me?" His response came immediately. "Just making sure you got home safe. You seemed upset." I replied, I told you not to follow me. That's really crossing a line. He sent back, don't be dramatic. I was being a gentleman. I waited another 20 minutes before driving home, constantly checking my rearview mirror. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, I sat in my car with the doors locked for another 10 minutes, scanning the street to make sure he hadn't followed me all the way home. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts from Hunter. At first, they seemed apologetic. Hey, sorry if I freaked you out last night. Can we talk? I think there was a misunderstanding. I really like you, Maya. But when I didn't respond right away, the tone changed completely. So you're just going to ignore me now? After everything I've done for you? You owe me for those dates. I spent over $200 on you. Fucking stuck-up bitch. There were 27 messages in total. I was honestly scared by how quickly he flipped. I sent one final text. Hunter, I don't think we're compatible. I'm not interested in seeing you again. Please don't contact me anymore. That's when things got really bad. He called me 13 times in a row. When I didn't pick up, he started texting about how I was just like all the other sluts and how I had led him on. I blocked his number immediately. For 2 days, there was silence. I started to think maybe he'd gotten the message. Then the anonymous calls started coming in. My phone would ring from no caller ID or random numbers I didn't recognize. Sometimes when I answered, there would just be silence or breathing, or someone would hang up immediately. Other times, no one would answer when I said hello, but I could hear background noise like someone was listening. 3 days after our last date, I came home from work to find a bouquet of lilies on my parents' front porch with a card that just said, I miss you. No signature, but I knew. My blood ran cold. I had never told Hunter where my parents lived. He must have followed me home that night or some other time I wasn't aware of. I told my parents everything that night. My dad wanted to call the police right away, but I convinced them to let me handle it one more time. I created a new email address and sent Hunter a message saying I had documented everything, including him following me and leaving flowers at my house, and that if he contacted me again or came near my home, I would go to the police. He responded almost immediately. I don't know what you're talking about with the flowers, but I understand. I'll leave you alone. I'm sorry things didn't work out. I wanted to believe him. For 5 days, everything was quiet. No calls, no messages, no signs of him. My parents had to go out of town for the weekend for my aunt's 60th birthday party. I was supposed to go too, but I had a deadline at work and decided to stay behind. They left Friday afternoon, and I had the house to myself. Everything was fine that evening. I ordered pizza, watched some Netflix, and went to bed around 11. I double-checked all the doors and windows before going upstairs, something I'd started doing obsessively since the flower incident. I woke up suddenly at 2:13 in the morning. At first I wasn't sure what had woken me. Then I heard it, a soft thud from downstairs, like something being bumped into. My heart immediately started hammering in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, the house settling, the wind, a squirrel on the roof, anything but what my brain was screaming at me. Then I heard another sound, unmistakable this time. Footsteps. Someone was walking across our tile kitchen floor. I froze completely. My phone was charging on my nightstand. With trembling hands, I reached for it, careful not to make any noise. I texted my dad. Is anyone supposed to be at the house? Those seconds waiting for his response felt like hours. Finally, no. We're all in Chicago. What's wrong? I could hear the footsteps moving from the kitchen to the living room. slow, deliberate steps, like someone was taking their time, looking around. My bedroom was at the top of the stairs. If someone came up, they'd pass right by my door. There was no lock on my bedroom door, something I'd never worried about before, but now seemed like the most important missing detail in the world. I slid out of bed as quietly as possible and looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. The closet seemed too obvious. Under the bed was my only option. I grabbed my phone and crawled underneath, pushing myself all the way against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I texted 911 with shaking fingers, explaining there was an intruder in my house. They responded that officers were on the way, but it could be 6 to 8 minutes. The footsteps were on the stairs now, slow, creaking, deliberate. I could hear each one, getting closer and closer. I put my hand over my mouth to quiet my breathing, which felt impossibly loud in the silence. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then started moving directly toward my room. My door wasn't fully closed. I always sleep with it cracked open. Through the narrow space between the floor and the bottom of my bed, I saw the door push open wider. A pair of shoes stepped into my room, black sneakers. I recognized them immediately as the ones Hunter had worn on our dates. He stood there for what felt like forever, not moving, just standing in my doorway. Then he started walking around my room. I heard him opening drawers, rustling through my things. I could see his feet moving around, stopping at my dresser, my desk. He picked something up. I later realized it was a framed photo of me and my friends from college. "Pretty Maya," he whispered. His voice was slurred. He was drunk again. He moved to my bed and sat down. The mattress dipped with his weight, pushing down close to where I was hiding. I could smell alcohol and cigarettes. I held my breath. "Fucking bitch," he muttered. "Think you're too good for me?" I had never been so terrified in my life. I was certain he knew I was under the bed, that at any moment he would look down and see me. My phone vibrated silently in my hand. A text from 911 saying officers were 2 minutes out. I didn't dare move to check it properly. Hunter stood up suddenly. He walked around the bed again, opened my closet, shuffled through my clothes. Then he picked something up. From my angle, I couldn't see what it was. "Something to remember you by," he said quietly. Then I heard sirens in the distance. He froze. The sirens got louder, clearly heading toward our house. "Shit," he hissed. He moved quickly then, rushing out of my room. I heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs. A door opened and closed somewhere downstairs. I stayed under the bed, shaking uncontrollably, until I heard banging on the front door and officers calling out. Even then, I couldn't make myself move until they came upstairs and found me. The police searched the house. They found that the dining room window had been jimmied open, a window I could have sworn I checked before bed. They took fingerprints and my statement. I showed them all the texts, the email, told them about the flowers and the following. But in the end, they couldn't prove it was Hunter who broke in. The fingerprints weren't clear enough. No one saw his car. He denied everything when they questioned him, claiming he was at a bar with friends all night. Friends who, of course, backed up his story. I got a restraining order against him last week, but it feels like a piece of paper won't stop him. I've moved out of my parents' house into an apartment with 2 roommates. I've changed my number, deleted all my social media accounts, and even dyed my hair. But I still wake up in the middle of the night, certain I hear footsteps. The police told me they're keeping an eye on the situation, but without definitive proof, there's not much more they can do. They suggested I install security cameras, carry pepper spray, take self-defense classes. But how do you defend yourself against someone who knows where you live, who watches you without you, knowing who sits on your bed while you hide underneath it. I don't know if he took something from my room that night. I've been too afraid to really look through my things and figure out what's missing. I don't want to know what something to remember me by he has. I'm writing this from my new apartment, doors locked, blinds closed. I jump at every sound. I scan every parking lot before getting out of my car. I look for his face in every crowd, because the worst part isn't what happened. It's not knowing when or if he'll come back. Story 18. I'm still not completely okay talking about this, but I need to get it off my chest. This happened during spring break last year, and I've been in therapy ever since. I'd been looking forward to Miami for months. My friend Michelle and I had been planning this trip since fall semester. We both needed a break from the freezing Midwest and our intense nursing program. We'd saved up, found a cute Airbnb with a little pool in Wynwood, and had our whole itinerary planned. We were going to do it all: South Beach, clubs, art walks, the works. We flew in on a Tuesday morning. The weather was perfect, 85 degrees and sunny. We dropped our stuff at the rental and headed straight to Miami Beach. I remember feeling so free, like all the stress from school had just melted away. The beach was packed with other spring breakers, music blasting from portable speakers, everyone living their best lives. That's where we met Will. I was in the water when he approached me. Tall, athletic build, dark hair, nice smile. He said something cheesy about how the ocean wasn't the only beautiful thing at the beach that day. Normally I'd roll my eyes at a line like that, but there was something about him. Confident, but not cocky. We started talking, and he seemed genuinely interested in my life. He told me he was from Chicago, in Miami, with his buddy Ken for the week. When Michelle came over from tanning, he introduced himself, then asked for my number before heading back to his friend. "He's hot," Michelle said, nudging me. I couldn't disagree. I got a text from him about an hour later, asking if we wanted to meet up that night. He suggested they could come by our rental for drinks first, then show us around Wynwood since they'd been there a few days already. It seemed like a good plan. Start somewhere safe before going out. We spent the afternoon shopping and getting ready. Will texted that they'd bring some alcohol. They showed up around 8. Ken was shorter than Will, kind of quiet, but seemed nice enough. We sat in the little backyard area by the pool, drinking and talking. I had 2 vodka sodas, and I was feeling good, but definitely not drunk. Will sat close to me, his leg touching mine. Every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. It was flattering. Around 10, Will suggested we head to this bar he knew in Wynwood, just a 10-minute walk away. It was this trendy place with neon signs and a dance floor. We got a table, and the guys bought a round of shots and some mixed drinks. The music was loud, people were dancing, and everything felt fun and normal. Ken seemed more interested in Michelle as the night went on, whispering in her ear, making her laugh. I was on my second drink at the bar when I noticed Michelle and Ken weren't at our table anymore. Will said they probably went to dance or stepped outside for air. I needed to use the bathroom, so I asked Will to watch my drink. The bathroom line was long. It took maybe 15 minutes before I got back to our table. That's when I saw it. Will didn't notice me approaching. He was hunched over my drink, his hand cupped around it, and I swear I saw him slip something in. It was so quick I almost thought I imagined it. When he looked up and saw me, there was this split-second change in his expression before he smiled again. "Hey, beautiful," was wondering. "Where you went," he said, sliding my drink toward me. Even though I'd had a few drinks, something in my brain just screamed danger. I felt suddenly very sober. I smiled back, trying not to show that I'd seen anything. "Actually, I'm not feeling great," I said. "I think I need some fresh air." He stood up immediately. "I'll come with you." "No," I said too quickly. "I mean, I might be sick. Just give me a minute alone." I walked toward the door, heart pounding. Once outside, I immediately started scanning for Michelle. She wasn't anywhere. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Where are you? Emergency." Nothing. I knew I couldn't go back inside. I just couldn't. So I did the only thing that made sense. I took an Uber back to our rental. The whole ride, I kept calling Michelle. Nothing. I was freaking out, wondering if Ken had done something to her too. When I got to the rental, I locked all the doors and windows. I was shaking. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Michelle. "Help me. Can't find my way back. So drunk." I immediately texted back, "Where are you? I'll come get you or send an Uber." The response came quick. "Near rental, I think. Let me in." Something felt off. Michelle would have called if she was that close. I texted, "Are you alone?" "Yes. Cold, please." I was about to go check when I heard something at the back door, the sound of the handle turning. My blood went cold. Someone was trying to get in. Then another text from Michelle's phone. "I'm at the back door. Let me in." I crept to the front window and peeked through the blinds. What I saw nearly made me collapse. Will was crouched by the front door, phone in hand, texting. He wasn't with Michelle. He was texting me from her phone. I backed away from the window, trying not to make a sound. The handle at the back door rattled again, more forcefully this time. I grabbed my phone and locked myself in the bathroom, calling 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. Those next 7 minutes were the longest of my life. The rattling at the back door stopped, but then I heard footsteps on the porch, then a knock at the front door. "Samantha, it's Will. Michelle's really sick. We need to get her inside." I didn't answer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. "Samantha, I know you're in there. Just open the door. Don't be like this." His voice changed then, getting lower, angrier. "Open the fucking door, Samantha." I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. Will must have heard them too, because the knocking stopped. I heard quick footsteps moving away from the house. When the police arrived, I was still locked in the bathroom, sobbing. They checked the entire property and found no one. That's when I completely lost it, telling them Michelle was missing, possibly drugged, that these guys had tried to trick me into opening the door. They took my statement and started looking for Michelle. About 45 minutes later, they found her walking along a street about 6 blocks away. She was completely disoriented, her purse gone, no phone. When they brought her back to the rental, she was a mess. Mascara streaked down her face, hair tangled, looking absolutely terrified. What she told us chilled me to the bone. Ken had suggested they go for a walk outside the bar. Once they were a few blocks away, he'd grabbed her purse. When she fought back, he pushed her down and ran. She couldn't remember much after that, just wandering, trying to find her way back, afraid to ask strangers for help because she didn't know who to trust. The police searched the property again and found Michelle's phone at the bottom of our rental's pool. They managed to retrieve it, and when they checked the messages, they confirmed what I already knew. Will had been texting me, pretending to be Michelle. The next morning, 2 detectives came by. They said they were taking the case seriously, but when they tried calling Will's number, it went to a generic voicemail. They suspected he'd been using a burner phone or a stolen one. They checked the bar's security footage and saw clear evidence of Will tampering with my drink, but they warned us that without knowing his real identity, it might be difficult to track him down. Michelle and I checked out of the rental that day. We couldn't stay there another night. We found a hotel near the airport and spent the rest of our vacation barely leaving the room, jumping at every noise. The police eventually identified the men from the bar footage, but by then they were long gone. They told us there had been similar reports from other areas, men working in pairs, targeting tourists, using similar tactics. It's been almost a year, and I still have nightmares. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't seen Will with my drink, or if I'd opened that door thinking Michelle needed help. The police said these kinds of predators often work in teams, one to separate a friend, one to drug the target. They suspected the plan was to rob us at minimum, but the detectives didn't rule out far worse intentions. I've never been back to Miami. I probably never will. Michelle and I don't talk about that night much, but I know she thinks about it too. Sometimes I wonder how many other girls weren't as lucky as we were, how many didn't notice their drink being tampered with, or who opened their door to someone they thought they could trust. The scariest part is how normal they seemed, how careful we thought we were being. We did everything you're supposed to do, stayed together, watched our drinks, met in public places. But they had a plan, they were patient, and they almost succeeded. I don't know if they'll ever catch those guys. I don't know how many others they've hurt. All I know is that my instincts saved me that night, and I'll never ignore them again.